The scent of fear hung in the air like a tangible fog, permeating the antechamber where rows of young women stood awaiting their fate. Arya could taste it on her tongue, metallic and sharp, a blend of collective terror from the girls around her and her own carefully concealed dread. The draft from the grand auction hall beyond sent chills across her skin despite the unseasonably warm autumn night. Standing in line, Arya kept her posture deliberately slumped, her gaze fixed on the floor. 22 years of life had taught her that sometimes invisibility was the greatest weapon. Her ashen blonde hair hung in a careless braid, the plain dress they had given her hanging loose on her frame, several sizes too large, making her appear smaller, weaker, less desirable. Exactly as she intended. Around her neck, concealed beneath the rough fabric of her dress, hung a silver crescent moon pendant. As the line shuffled forward, Arya touched it through the cloth, drawing comfort from its familiar contours, the last gift from her grandmother before the end. "When all seems dark," her grandmother had whispered as she pressed it into Arya's palm that final night, "remember that even the thinnest crescent still reflects light." The memory of her voice, strong despite her failing body, echoed in Arya's mind. The woman who had been shepherding them like cattle between holding cells barked out commands, her amber eyes gleaming with cold efficiency in the torchlight. "Stand straight, eyes down, speak only when spoken to, remember your place." Place. As if they had chosen this. As if being human with the right genetic markers, compatibility, they called it, was a choice and not a cruel biological lottery that had marked them for this auction. The companion auction was a tradition so ancient it predated written history among the Wolfmen clans. Once a year, human females with compatibility markers were gathered, some captured, some sold by desperate families, some handed over by human settlements as part of ancient treaties. They would be evaluated, tagged, and sold to the highest bidder among the alphas of various territories. Some girls wept silently, mascara from the mandatory beautification running down their cheeks. Others stood with chins raised defiantly, hoping to appear valuable. Arya simply observed, her pale blue eyes taking in every detail from beneath lowered lashes, the long scar on her left arm carefully concealed by the sleeve of her dress. "Number 37, the amber-eyed woman called. "Step forward." Arya moved through the narrow corridor leading to the stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded her, and the murmur of dozens of male voices crashed over her like a wave. They were all there, the alphas, trusted betas, pack counselors, evaluating every inch of her body as one might appraise livestock. "Lot 37, announced the auctioneer, his voice echoing through the hall. "Human female, 22 years of age, medium compatibility, no special skills recorded." He paused deliberately, drawing attention to her. "Health adequate, though showing scarring from a previous incident." Curious gazes fixed upon her left arm, where, beneath the fabric, the long scar descended from shoulder to elbow, a reminder of the day she lost everything. Arya fought to keep her expression neutral, to not reveal the surge of hatred that coursed through her veins at their scrutiny. The silence that followed was worse than any mockery. For the girls before her, all prettier, stronger, or with some special talent, the bidding had been fierce. For Arya, nothing came but the sound of chairs shifting uncomfortably and throats clearing in awkward silence. "Any opening bid for lot 37? The auctioneer tried again, irritation coloring his tone. More silence. From the corner of the room, Arya caught the sound of muffled laughter. She lowered her eyes, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Not from embarrassment, but from the effort of containing her triumph. The plan was working. No one wanted her. Soon they would move on, and in the chaos of transferring the purchased companions to their new owners, she would find her chance to slip away. "Well, if there's no interest, we'll proceed to the next lot," the auctioneer began, when a voice cut through the air like a blade. "My entire treasury." A murmur of shock rippled through the hall. Arya's head snapped up, her careful mask of submission momentarily forgotten as she sought the source of those words. At the back of the hall, a figure rose slowly from his seat. Tall, broad-shouldered, with raven hair that fell over a face of strong, angular features. Even at a distance, Arya could feel the weight of his gaze, intense, calculating, impossible to read. "Lord Draken Silverclaw of Red Peak Mountain," announced the auctioneer with evident surprise. "Your entire treasury for Lot 37? The silence now had a different quality, tense, electric. No one dared challenge the famous Alpha of Red Peak, known as much for his vast, wealthy territory as for his ruthlessness toward enemies. Stories about him circulated like terror tales among humans and wolfmen alike. How he had unified 3 warring packs under his command, how his eyes changed to an icy blue before ordering executions, how no companion had survived in his presence for more than a full moon cycle. "My entire treasury," Draken repeated, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room without raising its volume. "Is that not clear?" The auctioneer swallowed visibly. "Perfectly clear, my lord. Sold to Lord Draken Silverclaw of Red Peak Mountain." Arya's carefully constructed plan crumbled to ash. Sold to the most feared alpha in the 7 territories. Her pulse thundered in her ears as guards escorted her from the stage to a preparation room where other purchased girls awaited their new masters. "It's the Red Peak Alpha," whispered one wide-eyed girl. "They say the last companion who tried to escape." She drew her finger across her throat in a horrifying gesture. "Silence," ordered the amber-eyed woman. "You now belong to the Red Peak Pack. Conduct yourself with the dignity expected of Lord Draken's property." She threw a black cloak over Arya's shoulders. "He sent this for you. Dress and be ready in 10 minutes." The cloak was made of fine material, surprisingly warm, with silver detailing along the edges, the colors of his pack. As Arya wrapped it around herself, she was enveloped by an intense aroma of pine and something more primal, more wild. His scent, she realized, feeling an involuntary shiver travel up her spine. He had worn this cloak, a territorial marking. When guards led her to the outer courtyard, night had fallen completely. A line of black vehicles waited, and she was guided to the last one, an imposing SUV with darkened windows. The driver opened the rear door without a word, and Arya swallowed hard before entering. He was already inside, occupying the space as if the very air needed permission to circulate around him. Up close, Draken Silverclaw was even more intimidating, strong jawline covered by a short, well-trimmed beard, eyes of a deep forest green that seemed to see through skin and bone into her very thoughts, and a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He wore an impeccable black suit, but there was something primordial in his posture that no human clothing could tame. "Sit," he ordered, his voice softer than expected, but no less commanding. Arya obeyed immediately, maintaining the greatest possible distance between them on the leather seat. The car began to move, and for several minutes that felt like eternity, neither spoke. She could feel his gaze analyzing every detail of her face, every nervous movement of her hands. "What is your name?" he finally asked. "Arya," she answered, surprised her voice didn't falter. "Arya?" he repeated, as if testing the sound on his tongue. Not Lot 37 or human, but Arya. There was something strange in his emphasis, almost like respect. "Why did you buy me?" The words escaped before she could contain them, and immediately she regretted her boldness. Questioning him could be a death sentence. Instead of anger, something like curiosity passed through his eyes. "You don't think you're worth a treasury?" "No," Arya replied honestly. "No one else offered a single coin for me." A minimal smile, almost imperceptible, touched his lips. "Perhaps I see something they don't." His eyes drifted to her left arm, where the scar was partially visible beneath the cloak. "That mark. How did you get it?" Instinctively, Arya covered the scar with her right hand. "An attack. 3 years ago. My family—" Her voice faltered. The memories still too fresh, too painful. "Wild wolves," he completed, not as a question, but as certainty. "And yet you survived." Arya nodded slightly, unable to elaborate. "Most don't survive such an attack," he commented, seeming genuinely intrigued. especially humans without strong compatibility genes. The car entered a winding road that climbed up the mountain, and Arya realized they were leaving the city behind, entering the territory of Red Peak Mountain. The lights faded as the darkness of the forest enveloped them. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Home," he answered simply. "My territory. Your new home." "And what is expected of me there?" Arya knew all too well the purpose of companions, to serve the Alpha's pleasure, to attempt to bear half-wolf heirs, and in most cases, to die in the process. Drakon turned to her fully then, his penetrating eyes fixed on hers. "For now, I expect only one thing from you, Arya. Honesty. Don't try to please me. Don't pretend to be what you're not. I have enough sycophants in my pack." It wasn't the answer she had expected, leaving her even more confused and apprehensive. The car continued climbing the mountain, each curve taking them deeper into his territory, further from any possibility of escape. Through the window, Arya saw the crescent moon emerging between clouds, like the silver pendant she still clutched between her fingers, hidden in the folds of the cloak. "We've arrived," announced Drakon when the car finally stopped. Through the window, Arya saw a stone mansion that seemed to have been carved from the very mountain itself, imposing and ancient. Lights glimmered in some windows, and figures moved around the perimeter, guards, she realized, patrolling the boundaries of the property. "Welcome to Red Peak Mountain, Arya," said Drakon, opening the door of the car. When he stepped out, he extended his hand to her, a gesture that seemed strangely chivalrous for someone who had just purchased her at an auction. Arya hesitated momentarily, looking at that outstretched hand, strong and bearing scars from past battles, the hand of a predator. When she finally touched it, she felt a shock course through her body, like static electricity but more intense, deeper. His eyes widened slightly, and she knew he had felt it too. In that moment, as they stood beneath the moonlight, with the shadowy mansion behind them and the wild forest surrounding them, Arya had the strange and inexplicable feeling that her life had not ended at the auction. Somehow, against all odds, it was just beginning. Drakon led her through massive oak doors into a grand foyer where servants bowed deeply at his approach. The interior of the mansion was a labyrinth of stone corridors and immense halls, all decorated with an austere elegance that spoke of tradition and power. Guards and servants inclined their heads in respect as they passed, but their curious gazes followed Arya, the new acquisition of their king, the human that no one wanted at the auction. "This will be your room," said Drakon, opening a heavy carved door with moon symbols etched into the wood. To Arya's surprise, the chamber was spacious and welcoming, with a large canopied bed, a lit fireplace, and windows she imagined would offer a breathtaking view of the forest by morning light. "You'll find clothes in the wardrobe," he continued, his tone neutral and impossible to interpret. "A hot bath awaits through that door. Rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk more." Before Arya could ask any of the dozens of questions swirling in her mind, Drakon withdrew, closing the door behind him. She listened carefully, but heard no click of a lock. Was she free to leave? Something told her that even without locks, escape from this place would be impossible. She approached the window cautiously and pushed aside the heavy curtain. Moonlight illuminated a wild panorama of pine trees and cliffs descending down the mountainside. In the distance, she could distinguish figures moving between the trees, wolves on patrol, too large to be ordinary animals. A shiver ran down her spine. Even if she managed to escape the mansion, she wouldn't get far before being hunted down. The hot bath proved an unexpected luxury. As the water washed away days of fear and humiliation, Arya tried to organize her thoughts. Why had the feared Alpha of Red Peak chosen her? What did he want? His words in the car echoed in her mind. "Perhaps I see something they don't." After her bath, she found dresses and pants of fine fabrics in the wardrobe, all in the colors of the pack: black, gray, and silver. She chose a simple, comfortable outfit, and as she dressed, noticed a small mirror on the wall. It had been so long since she had properly looked at herself that she barely recognized her reflection. Tired blue eyes in a pale face, light blonde hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders, the scar on her left arm contrasting starkly with her fair skin. "Survivor," she whispered to her reflection, remembering Draken's observation. It was true. She had survived when everyone around her had perished. Perhaps she could survive this too. Sleep came surprisingly easily in the soft bed, lulled by the distant sound of wind through the trees. But nightmares, those old companions, soon found her. She was back in that mountain cabin. The fire was low in the hearth, and everyone slept deeply. Her parents, her younger sister, everyone except Arya, awakened by a premonition she couldn't explain. Then came the first howl, followed by another and another, forming a macabre symphony that froze her blood. "Dad!" she screamed, shaking her father. Too late. The door exploded into splinters, and they entered. Not ordinary wolves, but monstrous creatures, half-human, with eyes glowing with hunger and hatred. Arya woke with a strangled cry caught in her throat, her body covered in cold sweat. It took several seconds to orient herself, to remember where she was, the room in Red Peak Mansion, the auction, Draken. Another nightmare. The deep voice startled her. In the dimness of the room, Arya distinguished the imposing silhouette of Draken, seated in a chair near the window. Moonlight partially illuminated his face, highlighting the strong angles of his jaw, the penetrating gleam of his eyes. "What are you doing here?" she asked, pulling the cover to her chin instinctively. "You screamed," he answered simply, "and then spoke in your sleep. Names. Pleas for help." Arya felt her face burn with embarrassment. "How long have you been watching me?" "Long enough." He stood and approached the bed, but maintained a respectful distance. "You relive the attack every night?" Arya averted her gaze. "Almost every night." "Tell me what happened," he asked, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. Something in the way he asked, not an order, but a genuine request, broke something inside her. Words began to flow like water from a broken dam. "It was winter. We were in a cabin in the mountains, my family and I. One night they came." Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced herself to continue. "A wild pack, renegades without an alpha, from what I understood later. They attacked without warning, without mercy." Draken remained silent, his face an impenetrable mask, but his eyes never left hers. "They killed my father first," Arya continued, "then my mother, my younger sister." Her voice faltered. "She was only 12. Draken's shoulders tensed slightly, but his expression remained controlled. "I tried to fight, tried to protect her." Arya touched the scar on her arm. "That's when I got this. But it wasn't enough. They took her and left me to die, bleeding in the snow." "But you didn't die," Draken observed, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I don't know exactly how," Arya admitted. "I remember dragging myself outside, the excruciating pain, the cold. Then, darkness. When I woke, I was in a hospital. Hunters had found me, nearly frozen. Miracle, they called it. I call it punishment. Living when everyone I loved died." A heavy silence fell between them. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. "Do you hate them?" Draken finally said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. "Hate what?" Arya replied, raising her chin defiantly. "Wolfmen," Draken clarified. "Creatures like me." Arya considered the question, letting her honest answer form. "I hate those who killed my family. I hate the system that allows humans to be hunted, sold, and discarded like objects." She paused, meeting his gaze directly. "But no, I don't hate you. Not yet." Something like a smile touched Draken's lips. "Honesty. Good." He stood. "Try to sleep more. Tomorrow I want to show you something." As he turned to leave, a question escaped her. "Why do you care about my nightmares, about my story?" Draken paused at the door, his silhouette outlined against the light from the corridor. "Because I too know what it is to lose everything, Arya," he said quietly. "And I know what it is to survive when others could not." Morning came with golden light streaming through the windows, turning the stone walls of Arya's chamber into warm amber. She was awakened by a young woman with golden eyes who introduced herself as Seraphina, her personal assistant. "How long have you served him?" Arya asked as she attempted to tame her rebellious hair. Seraphina hesitated, as if evaluating whether she could converse with Arya. "I was born in the pack," she finally answered. "My father has been the king's counselor for 3 generations of alphas." "And what is he like?" Arya pressed. "Draken, as an alpha, as a person." The word sounded strange applied to a wolf man, but she couldn't think of another. "Fair," Seraphina replied promptly. "Severe when necessary, but fair. The pack has prospered under his rule as never before." She paused, then added more quietly, "More solitary, though. Since he took the throne after the war, he keeps everyone at a distance." "War?" Arya repeated, curious. Seraphina's eyes widened slightly, as if she had said too much. "It's not my place to speak of that. You should hurry. The king doesn't like to wait." The inner courtyard of the mansion was an expansive space surrounded by stone columns with a fountain at its center. Draken awaited her, dressed more simply than the previous day, dark pants and a long-sleeved shirt that still couldn't disguise the powerful musculature of his body. "Good morning, Arya," he greeted her formally. "Did you sleep better after our conversation?" "Yes," she answered, surprising herself that it was true. "Thank you for listening." He nodded briefly. "Come, I want to show you something that might help you understand why you're here." They followed a corridor leading to the rear of the mansion, where a stone path wound between well-tended gardens to a stone structure older than the rest of the property. The doors were wrought iron, intricately worked with lunar symbols similar to those on her bedroom door. "This is the Temple of the Moon," explained Draken, his voice taking on a solemn tone. "A sacred place for our kind. Few humans have ever stepped inside." When the doors opened, Arya was greeted by an intense aroma of herbs and incense. The interior was a circular room with a domed ceiling that allowed natural light to enter. In the center, on a stone pedestal, rested an object that immediately captured her attention, a silver dagger, its blade reflecting light like liquid water. "The lunar blade," Draken presented, approaching the pedestal. "According to our legends, it was forged from the first ray of moonlight that touched the earth, captured by our ancestors. For generations, it has been the symbol of the Alpha's power in Red Peak." Arya felt inexplicably drawn to the object. There was something almost hypnotic in the way light danced on the silver. "It's beautiful," she murmured, taking an involuntary step toward the pedestal. "And deadly," added Draken, his tone now grave. "Pure silver is poison to us wolfmen. A cut from this blade can kill even an alpha." Arya frowned, confused. Why keep something so dangerous as a treasure? "Because all true power carries within it the seed of its own destruction," he answered, his green eyes fixed on hers. "A reminder that even the strongest can fall." Something in the way he spoke, solemn and intense, made Arya realize there was more to this story than he was telling. "Does this have something to do with the war that Seraphina mentioned?" A flash of surprise crossed Draken's face, quickly replaced by a calculating look. "So she spoke of that." "It wasn't her fault," Arya defended quickly. "She only mentioned it in passing. She said you took the throne after a war." Draken was silent for a moment, as if deciding how much to tell her. 3 years ago," he began finally, his voice controlled but laden with contained emotion, "this pack was divided. My older brother Fenris was Alpha by birthright, but he ruled with cruelty." Arya's heart accelerated as she began to see where this story was heading. "When he began ordering attacks on human settlements for mere pleasure," Draken continued, his jaw tightening at the memory. Arya's breath caught. 3 years ago," she repeated, the realization hitting her like lightning. "It was his pack. It was your brother who—" Draken nodded gravely. The renegades who attacked your family were loyal followers of Fenris. I banished them from the territory after taking power, but they continued their hunts. The world seemed to spin around Arya. All this time, she had blamed nameless, faceless wild wolves, creatures without identity. Now, suddenly, the horror had a name: Fenris, brother of the man before her. "You knew?" she accused, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "From the beginning, you knew who I was? What happened to my family?" "Yes," he admitted without hesitation. "When I saw your scar at the auction, I recognized the pattern, the mark of my brother's claws. He had a specific way of attacking his victims." Anger rose within Arya like a wave. "And that's why you bought me? Guilt? Pity?" "No." His eyes fixed on hers with an almost physical intensity. "I bought you because among all those girls with perfect genes and flawless beauty, you were the only one who had already faced darkness and survived, the only one who knew true horror and still held her head high." He took a step toward her, and instinctively Arya retreated. "And also," he continued, his voice lower, "because you may be the key to ending Fenris's threat once and for all." "What do you mean?" "My brother isn't dead, Arya." Draken's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "He survived our battle, though gravely injured, and now gathers strength in the shadows. According to my spies, he plans an attack during the next lunar eclipse, when my powers will be at their weakest. And what does that have to do with me?" "Fenris never leaves witnesses," said Draken, his eyes never leaving hers. "Never. The fact that you survived his attack haunts him. He considers you an affront to his reputation, an anomaly that needs to be corrected." An icy sensation spread through Arya's chest. "You're saying he still hunts me, after all this time?" "Yes. And now that I've publicly purchased you, he will come with even more determination. For him, this is a personal insult, me protecting the only human who escaped his claws." The anger Arya felt gave way to a deep, primal fear. "So you used me as bait," she whispered, the bitter taste of betrayal on her tongue. "No," Draken responded firmly, taking another step toward her. This time, Arya didn't retreat. "I offered protection to someone my brother destroyed, and yes, your presence here will draw him out. But that's not why I brought you here, not only why." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. There was something there, a vulnerability, a truth he wasn't saying with words. "Then why?" she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Draken extended his hand, and before Arya could react, lightly touched the scar on her arm. An electric shock ran through her body at his touch, and a flash of images exploded in her mind. Blood on snow, golden eyes in darkness, excruciating pain, and then a sensation of connection, of recognition, as if something within her was responding to something within him. Breathless, Arya pulled away, confused and frightened by what she had just experienced. "What was that?" Draken's face showed the same shock she felt. "You saw something?" he said, not as a question, but as confirmation of something he suspected. "Images from the attack," Arya admitted, still trembling. "How did you—" "It wasn't me," he interrupted, his gaze now calculating. "It was you. Somehow, when he attacked you, when your blood touched his claws, something happened, something I've never seen before." The sensation of vertigo increased. "I don't understand." "Neither do I completely," admitted Draken. "But I believe that somehow you absorbed a part of his essence. That's why you survived when you should have died. That's why when I touch your scar, I can see your memories. And that's why—" He hesitated. "Why what?" Arya pressed when he hesitated. His eyes met hers again, now with a somber certainty. "That's why you may be the only one capable of destroying him once and for all." Draken's revelation echoed in Arya's mind as they walked back to the mansion in silence. The only one capable of destroying him. The words carried a weight that seemed to crush her shoulders. She, a fragile human who had barely saved herself, now seen as some kind of secret weapon against a monster who haunted her nightmares. "You don't believe it," observed Draken as they entered a vast study hall filled with ancient books and maps on the walls. "It's not a question of believing," Arya replied, her voice firmer than she expected. "It's a question of being realistic. I'm human. I don't even have enough strength to face a common wolf, much less an alpha renegade." "Physical strength isn't the only form of power," Draken said, approaching a bookshelf and retrieving an ancient-looking book, its leather cover worn by time. "There are other types of connections, other ancient magics our ancestors knew well." "Magic?" Arya repeated, unable to hide the skepticism in her voice. "I thought wolfmen were creatures of nature, not fairy tale sorcerers." A minimal smile touched Draken's lips. "The line between nature and magic is thinner than humans like to believe." He opened the book to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "Here, the legend of the blood-bonded." Arya cautiously approached, observing the illustrations on the yellowed parchment. A human figure kneeling, bleeding, and a gigantic wolf whose claws seemed to penetrate not just the flesh, but the very essence of the victim. "According to this legend," explained Draken, his voice taking on the grave tone of a storyteller of ancient tales, "when the blood of a special human mixes with the claws or fangs of an alpha wolf man under moonlight, a transfer can occur, a bond that connects their essences." "Like an infection?" Arya asked, remembering stories about how humans transformed into wolfmen. "No, transformation is different, more mechanical. This is deeper, rarer. The person doesn't transform, but acquires a connection with the wolf that wounded them. They can feel their emotions, sometimes see through their eyes, and in exceptional cases—" He paused, his eyes finding mine with intensity. "In exceptional cases, they can affect their actions, weaken their powers, even guide others to destroy them." A shiver ran down Arya's spine. "And you think I'm one of these special people?" "You survived an attack that should have killed you. You resisted injuries that would have been fatal for any ordinary human. And when I touched your scar, I saw your memories as if they were my own." His eyes didn't leave hers. "Yes, I believe you are a blood-bonded." Arya swallowed hard, trying to process what that meant. "Even if that's true, what do you expect me to do? Just walk up to Fenris and convince him to kill himself?" "No," answered Draken, closing the book. "But with proper training, you can learn to use that connection, to sense when he's near, to know his plans, perhaps even to weaken his powers when you're close enough." "Training?" Arya repeated, confused. "What kind of training?" "The kind that begins now," he said, returning the book to the shelf. "Follow me." He led her through corridors that descended deeper and deeper into the mansion until they reached a heavy metal door. When he opened it, it revealed a circular room without windows, lit only by torches on the walls. In the center was a circle drawn on the floor with what appeared to be silver paint. "Liquid silver," explained Draken, noticing her gaze. "A protection circle. Within it, Fenris's influence over you will be minimized, allowing us to work with your mind without interference." "You brought me to a dungeon," Arya observed dryly, trying to mask her nervousness with sarcasm. "I brought you to the safest place in this mansion," he corrected. "Here, not even the closest members of my pack can hear or interfere with us." Something in the way he said this made Arya frown. "You don't trust your own pack?" A sigh escaped his lips. "I trust many, but Fenris has sympathizers everywhere, even here, even among those who should be most loyal." Understanding dawned on Arya. "That's why you live so isolated? Why, as Seraphina said, you keep everyone at a distance?" A shadow seemed to cross his face. "My brother had a gift for inspiring blind devotion. Even after everything he did, some still see him as the true king." He guided her into the silver circle, and to her surprise, sat on the floor, indicating that she should do the same across from him. "What are we going to do?" Arya asked, hesitantly accommodating herself before him. "First, we need to strengthen your mind. If you're going to use this connection, you need to be able to control the flow of information, not be controlled by it. How will we do that? In response, he extended his hands, palms up. Give me your hands and close your eyes. Arya hesitated, looking at those strong hands marked by scars from countless battles. Placing her hands in his seemed like an act of surrender, a vulnerability she wasn't sure she could allow. I don't trust you, she admitted quietly. I'm not asking for blind trust, he replied, his voice surprisingly gentle. I'm asking for a temporary truce, a pact between the two of us against a common enemy. He was right, of course. Fenris was as much her enemy as his. With a resigned sigh, she placed her hands on his and closed her eyes. The moment their touches connected, she felt that same electric current course through her body, but this time she was prepared. Instead of pulling away, she breathed deeply, trying to stay anchored. Good, murmured Draken. Now I want you to visualize your mind as a fortress. High walls, closed gates. Nothing enters without your permission. Nothing leaves without control. Arya tried to follow his instructions, imagining stone walls around her thoughts, around her memories. It was harder than it seemed. Her mind insisted on wandering, on being distracted by sensations, the warmth of his hands beneath hers, the pine and musk aroma emanating from him, the sound of their breathing in the silence of the chamber. Focus, he instructed, as if he could sense her attention dispersing. Visualize the walls. Make them real in your mind. Arya tried again, and this time managed to form a clearer image, a high, imposing circular wall surrounding the core of her thoughts. Around it, a deep moat. In her mental vision, she positioned herself atop the wall, observing the external landscape, a misty horizon where shadowy forms moved in the distance. I see something, she whispered, surprised by the clarity of the vision. Shadows in the distance, watching. She felt Draken's hands tighten slightly around hers. They are echoes of him, memories perhaps, or fragments of the connection. Don't let them approach. Reinforce your walls. Arya concentrated on strengthening the imaginary walls, adding stones, raising them higher. But the more she tried, the more the shadows seemed to agitate, as if they sensed her resistance and felt provoked by it. One of them, larger, darker, more defined than the others, began to advance toward her mental fortress. It was no longer a simple shadow, but was beginning to take form, the form of a gigantic wolf with eyes that glowed like embers. He's coming, Arya gasped, feeling drops of cold sweat running down her forehead. Can he see me? Can he see us? He can. Maintain control. Draken's voice seemed distant now. You're in command here. These are your thoughts, your mind. He only has the power you allow him to have. But the lupine figure continued advancing, becoming more and more distinct, more and more threatening. When it reached the edge of the moat surrounding Arya's imaginary fortress, it rose on its hind legs, assuming a half-human, half-wolf form. And then it spoke, with a voice like ice cracking in dark water. You are mine, little survivor. You always will be. A scream escaped Arya's throat, and her eyes opened suddenly. She found Draken's face inches from hers, his hands now firmly holding her wrists. Arya, come back. It's all right. You're safe. Her entire body trembled, and she realized there were tears running down her face. He spoke to me, she whispered in horror. He saw me. He knows I'm here. Draken's expression became grave. This is unexpected. The connection is stronger than we suspected. He released her wrists and stood, extending his hand to help her up. Enough for today. You need to rest. But when Arya tried to stand, her legs gave way beneath her. Draken caught her before she fell, his strong arms wrapping around her with surprising gentleness. I'm sorry, she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. Don't apologize for something you can't control, he replied. And to her surprise, instead of letting her go, he lifted her in his arms as if she weighed no more than a child. The first conscious contact with the bond always drains one's strength. Your body will learn to adapt. Arya didn't protest when he carried her out of the chamber and up the corridors toward her room. She was too exhausted, and there was something strangely comforting about being carried like this, about feeling the warmth of his body against hers after the coldness that Fenris's presence had left in her mind. When they reached her room, Draken gently deposited her on the bed. "Rest," he ordered softly. "Tomorrow we will continue, but with more precautions." Before he could walk away, Arya grasped his wrist. "Wait, I need to know what happened between you. Between you and Fenris? Why did he become what he is?" Draken hesitated, his eyes searching hers in the dimness of the room. For a moment, she thought he would ignore her question, but then he sat on the edge of the bed, his face partially illuminated by the moonlight entering through the window. "Fenris and I were born twins," he began, his voice low and controlled, but laden with contained emotion, a rarity among wolfmen. "Our father, the previous king, raised us to compete for everything: his approval, the pack's respect, the right to the throne. Fenris was born minutes before me, which technically made him the firstborn and heir." He paused, his eyes fixed on some distant point, as if seeing the past unfolding before him. "We grew up together, fought together, hunted together. We were inseparable despite the rivalry, until our father died when we were 20. It was unexpected. Some said it was poisoning, others spoke of a mysterious disease. The truth was never discovered. And Fenris took the throne," Arya concluded, seeing where the story was heading. "Yes, and at first he ruled well. He was charismatic, strong, respected. I served as his beta, his right hand and counselor." A heavy sigh escaped his lips. But gradually, something began to change in him. He became obsessed with the idea that everyone was conspiring against him, especially humans. He began ordering attacks on isolated villages, saying it was necessary to maintain fear, to ensure our supremacy. "Like the attack on my family," Arya said quietly. Draken nodded, his eyes meeting hers again, filled with an old pain. "I tried to dissuade him, tried to show that path would only lead to our destruction. Humans are many, they have technology, organization. An open war would be the end of our species, but he wouldn't listen. He became increasingly cruel, more irrational." "What caused the final war between you?" A muscle contracted in Draken's jaw. One night, he returned from a hunt covered in blood, not just human blood, but that of wolfmen. He had also exterminated a small allied pack that dared question his methods, including cubs. His voice faltered slightly. "At that moment, I knew he was no longer my brother. Something had consumed him, something dark and insatiable." "So you challenged him," Arya completed, imagining the terrible scene. "Yes, a duel for leadership, as our oldest tradition dictates. We fought for hours, destroying half the mansion in the process. When I finally managed to subdue him, I was about to deliver the final blow." He hesitated, a visible conflict on his face. "But I couldn't. Despite everything, he was still my twin brother, my blood, and he took advantage of my mercy to escape." "And he escaped," Arya concluded. "Yes, he wounded me gravely and fled, taking with him the most loyal of his followers. Since then, he has been hiding in the shadows, attacking occasionally, always reminding me that one day he will return to take what he believes is his by right." Arya looked at him with new understanding. He wasn't just a powerful and feared Alpha King, but a man tormented by an impossible choice, carrying the weight of a betrayal that should never have happened. "You still blame yourself?" she observed softly, "for not killing him when you had the chance." His eyes met hers, more vulnerable than she had ever seen them. "Every person he kills since then. The blood is on my hands too." Without thinking, Arya extended her hand and touched his face, feeling the rough texture of his short beard under her fingers. "No, compassion is not weakness, Draken. It's what differentiates us from monsters." For a moment, he closed his eyes, leaning his face slightly against her hand, as if that simple touch offered him comfort long denied. When he opened them again, There was something different in them, a warmth, a vulnerability that completely transformed his habitually severe expression. "Rest now," he said finally, pulling away and standing. "Tomorrow will be another difficult day." At the door, he stopped and looked back. "Arya?" "Yes?" "No matter what happens, I won't let him hurt you again. That's a promise." When the door closed behind him, Arya lay staring at the ceiling, her thoughts a whirlwind. In just a few days, her world had been turned upside down, from a valueless prisoner to a central piece in a war between brothers, from a victim to a potential weapon. And Drakon, the feared alpha king she should hate, but who somehow she was beginning to see as something more complex, more human than she had ever imagined possible. Outside, the moon shone through the clouds, illuminating the mountains with its silver light. Somewhere in that wild vastness, she knew Fenris waited, watching, planning, and somehow connected to her by a bond she barely understood. Arya touched the crescent moon pendant she always kept with her, remembering her grandmother's words. "When all seems dark, remember that even the thinnest crescent still reflects light." She would need all the light possible to face the darkness approaching. The days that followed brought a rhythm of training that Arya had never expected. Each morning, Drakon would lead her to the underground chamber with the silver circle, where they spent hours exploring the limits of her connection with Fenris. The sessions were exhausting but revealing. Arya learned to recognize the sensation of his presence, a peculiar coldness that spread from her left arm up to her chest. She learned to raise mental barriers when the sensation became too strong, to control the flow of images that occasionally invaded her mind. "You're progressing rapidly," observed Drakon at the end of their 5th day of training. "Your mental fortress is stronger. He tries, but can no longer speak directly to you." Arya nodded, exhausted but satisfied with her progress. She was still far from understanding the bond completely, or how to use it against Fenris, but each small victory gave her hope. As days transformed into weeks, Arya noticed something changing, not only in herself, but in the dynamics between her and Drakon. The training sessions created an unexpected intimacy. Spending hours with their minds connected, their hands touching, broke down barriers that words could never overcome. She began to see beyond the facade of the feared Alpha King, seeing the complex man beneath the crown, his doubts, his regrets, his profound loneliness. And he, in turn, seemed to see more in her than simply a fragile human. He respected her determination, praised her courage, listened to her opinions with genuine interest. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Serafina appeared in Arya's room with an elegant silver silk dress. "The king requests your presence for dinner in the Great Hall," she informed, a small smile playing on her lips. "The entire pack will be present." Arya frowned, confused. Until then, she had taken all her meals in her room or privately with Drakon in his office, away from the potentially hostile gazes of the other wolfmen. "Why?" she asked as she examined the dress, undeniably beautiful, with black lace details that echoed the symbols of the pack. "The Full Moon Council," explained Serafina, helping Arya untangle her light blonde hair. "It happens every lunar cycle. All important members of the pack gather to discuss territorial matters, alliances, threats, and also to evaluate the Alpha's companion." Arya froze, the brush still in her hand. "I am not his companion." Serafina raised an eyebrow, her golden eyes gleaming with amusement. "No? You spend every moment together. He protects you, trains you personally. No Alpha dedicates so much time to a mere human." "It's different," Arya insisted, feeling her face warm. "It's about Fenris, about the threat he represents." "If you say so," Serafina replied in a tone that made it clear she didn't believe a word. "Regardless, get dressed. The king doesn't like to wait." The great hall was impressive with its vaulted ceiling, decorated with carvings of hunting scenes and stained glass that filtered the moonlight. Long oak tables extended through the space, occupied by dozens of members of the pack, all formally dressed. When Arya entered, accompanied by Serafina, A gradual silence fell over the hall, and all eyes turned to her. Draken waited in the center of the hall, magnificent in his formal attire, a black suit with silver details that echoed the motifs of her dress, as if they had been deliberately matched. At his side, a group of older men and women whom Arya presumed to be the council. "Arya," Draken greeted her with a slight inclination of his head, extending his hand in her direction. "Welcome to the Full Moon Council." Arya walked to him, conscious of every pair of eyes that followed her, and placed her hand over his. A murmur ran through the hall when Draken led her not to just any seat, but to the chair at his right at the main table, the place traditionally reserved for the Alpha's companion. "You look beautiful," he whispered as he helped her sit, his warm breath against her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Before she could respond, an elderly man with white hair stood. "King Draken," he spoke, his voice surprisingly strong for his frail appearance. "The Council questions the wisdom of including a human in our sacred deliberations, especially one who has not undergone the union ritual." "Counselor Thaddeus," replied Draken calmly. "Arya is not a simple human. Her presence here is essential for our discussion about the threat we face." "The threat you allege we face," interrupted a middle-aged woman, her amber eyes shining with distrust. "Many of us have still not seen concrete evidence that Fenris plans an attack." A murmur of agreement ran through the room, and Arya felt a knot form in her stomach. So that was it. There were dissidents in the pack, people who doubted Draken, or worse, secretly sympathized with Fenris. "Counselor Serena." Draken kept his voice controlled, but Arya could feel the tension in his body beside her. "Reports from our scouts confirm suspicious movements on the southern borders. 3 human villages have been attacked in the last month with the same pattern my brother used to use." "Humans are not our concern," retorted another counselor, a corpulent man with a red beard. "And even if it were Fenris's work, he would not dare attack our territory directly." Arya could sense the frustration growing in Draken, how he struggled to convince his own council of a threat he knew was real. Without thinking too much, she placed her hand over his on the table, feeling that familiar electric current run through her arm. "He will come," she said, her voice firmer than expected. All eyes turned to her, some surprised, others irritated by her intrusion. "During the lunar eclipse, I can feel him. I can see his plans." "And we should trust the sensations of a human?" mocked Serena with evident disdain. "Not of any human," Draken intervened. "Of a blood-bonded." A shocked silence fell over the hall. Apparently, the legend was known and respected even among the most skeptical. "That's impossible," whispered Thaddeus, his face pale. "There has been no record of a blood bond in generations." "And yet here she is," responded Draken, his tone leaving no room for arguments. "Arya survived a direct attack by Fenris, carries his mark, and through that connection can sense his intentions, see fragments of his plans." "If what you say is true," said an elderly female counselor who had not yet spoken, "then we need to hear what she has to say." All eyes turned expectantly to Arya. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility. In recent training sessions, she had captured scattered images, unfamiliar faces, maps, weapons being prepared, but nothing concrete enough to convince a council of skeptical wolfmen. It was then that she felt that familiar cold sensation spreading through her left arm. The scar began to tingle, then burn, as if it were being reopened. Arya gasped, instinctively grabbing her arm. "Arya!" Draken's concerned voice seemed distant, as images invaded her mind with a clarity they had never had before. Fenris, older than in her memories, his face partially disfigured by claw scars, the marks left by Draken in their duel. He was in a cave surrounded by dozens of wild-looking wolfmen with a desperate appearance. "The eclipse in 3 days," he was saying, his voice a guttural growl. "When the moon disappears, my brother's powers will be at their weakest. We will attack on 3 fronts, north, east, and through the underground tunnel." Underground tunnel? The image changed, showing a map of the region with a red line marking a path that began in a cave in the mountains and ended directly beneath the Red Peak mansion. Arya returned to reality with a strangled cry, finding the hall in absolute silence. Everyone was staring at her, some with fear, others with fascination, few with remaining skepticism. "What did you see?" asked Draken, holding her shoulders, his intense eyes fixed on hers. 3 days, Arya whispered, her voice trembling. "The eclipse is in 3 days. They will come from 3 fronts, including—" She looked around, hesitant to reveal everything before the council when they still suspected traitors among them. Draken understood her hesitation. "Council dismissed," he announced abruptly. "Prepare the pack for immediate defense. Block all known entrances to the territory. Double the patrols." When the last counselor left, closing the doors behind him, Draken turned to Arya. "Now tell me everything." "There's a tunnel," Arya explained quickly. "An underground path that leads directly under the mansion. That's how he plans to take you by surprise." Draken's face paled. The Ancestors' Tunnel. An ancient passage built as an escape route during the wars with human hunters. We believed it had collapsed decades ago. "Well, Fenris knows it hasn't collapsed," Arya replied, the urgency clear in her voice, "and he will come with everything he has." Draken stood, walking to the window and looking at the almost full moon in the sky. 3 days. Time enough to prepare a defense." He hesitated, his shoulders tense. "I don't know if we have enough warriors. Many are still secretly loyal to him. Others are on distant missions." "So what will we do?" He turned to her, his green eyes shining with fierce determination. "We won't just defend ourselves. We will counterattack. Use your connection to lure him into a trap." "How?" Arya asked, a knot forming in her stomach. "The Temple of the Moon," answered Draken, approaching her again. "It's the safest place on the property, protected by ancient enchantments. If we can bring Fenris there, isolate him from his followers." "The lunar blade," Arya concluded, remembering the silver dagger she had seen in the temple. "The only weapon that can kill an alpha." Draken nodded gravely. "But for that, we need bait, someone with whom he is obsessed enough to risk everything." Their eyes met, and understanding passed between them without need for words. Arya would be the bait, the only survivor, the anomaly that stained his perfect reputation as an assassin. "It's too risky," Draken said, his tone belying his words. "I can't ask you to place yourself in such danger." "You're not asking," Arya replied firmly. "I'm offering. This is my fight as much as yours, Draken. He took my family from me, destroyed my previous life. If I can help stop him from doing the same to others—" Draken approached, his eyes never leaving hers. With surprising gentleness, he touched her face, his fingers tracing the contours of her cheek. "You are extraordinary, Arya," he whispered. "Stronger than any pure-blood she-wolf I've ever known." The warmth of his touch, the intensity of his gaze made Arya's heart race. In that moment, she forgot that he was an Alpha King, that she was technically his property purchased at an auction. There was just a man and a woman, united by a common cause, by a mutual understanding that transcended species. "Draken," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "If we don't survive this—" He didn't let her finish. Leaning in, he captured her lips with his in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened, becoming something primal, desperate, laden with all the unspoken words between them. His hands found her waist, pulling her firmly against his body, but without brutality. When they finally separated, both breathless, Arya saw something in his eyes she had never noticed before: vulnerability, desire, and something deeper she dared not name. "Don't speak of not surviving," he said hoarsely. "We have both survived things that should have destroyed us. We will survive this too, together." The 3 days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations. The mansion transformed into a fortress with armed warriors patrolling every corridor, every window, every known entrance. The tunnel was located and prepared with traps, but not blocked. They wanted Fenris to believe his plan was still intact. Meanwhile, Arya continued her training with Draken, now with a specific purpose, learning to project thoughts through the bond rather than just receiving them. If she could send Fenris images of herself alone in the Moon Temple, vulnerable and unprotected, perhaps they could lure him away from his followers, directly into their trap. On the eve of the eclipse, Draken found Arya in the garden, observing the moon, almost complete in the night sky. "Are you ready?" he asked, sitting beside her on the stone bench. "No," Arya answered honestly, "but I'll do what's necessary." He took her hands in his. "There's still time to change your mind. I can send you away to a safe place." Arya shook her head determinedly. "My place is here, by your side." Draken smiled, a rare and genuine smile that completely transformed his normally severe face. "When all this is over," he said quietly, "if we survive—" "When we survive," Arya corrected. "When we survive," he agreed. "I want you to know that you have a choice. You can stay or leave. You won't be my prisoner, nor my property." "And if I choose to stay?" Arya asked, her heart accelerating. "Not as a prisoner, nor as property, but as my equal," Draken completed, his green eyes shining in the moonlight. "As my chosen companion, not purchased." Before Arya could respond, they both felt, at the same time, a cold and invasive presence, like a shadow passing over the sun. Arya grasped her left arm, feeling the scar pulse painfully. "He's testing the bond," whispered Draken, checking his location. Arya closed her eyes, concentrating as they had practiced. Instead of blocking Fenris completely, she allowed him to capture carefully selected fragments. Her in the moon temple, alone, vulnerable. The lunar blade shining on its pedestal. Draken far away, occupied with external defenses. "He took the bait," Arya whispered, opening her eyes. "He's coming." The next morning, the tension in the mansion was palpable. The eclipse would begin at noon and last only a few minutes, enough time, according to legends, for an alpha's powers to be significantly reduced. As planned, Arya positioned herself in the moon temple an hour before the eclipse. Draken and his most trusted warriors were hidden in adjacent chambers, ready to intervene at the right moment. The lunar blade rested on the pedestal as always, but now it was connected to a thin silver thread that led to Arya's right hand, hidden in the folds of her dress. Time seemed to drag as she waited, seated on a stone bench before the pedestal, pretending to meditate. Finally, she felt the temperature in the temple drop drastically, and that icy sensation in her arm intensified to the point of being almost unbearable. "Hello, little survivor." The voice she knew from her nightmares, now terribly real, reached her ears. Arya slowly opened her eyes, forcing herself to appear calm despite the terror that threatened to paralyze her. Fenris stood at the entrance to the temple, alone, as they had hoped. He was disturbingly similar to Draken in height and physical structure, but distorted, like a corrupted version. His face was partially disfigured by deep scars, and his eyes had an unnatural red glow. He was dressed all in black, without the silver details that characterized the Red Peak Pack's attire. "We finally meet formally," Arya managed to say, her voice surprisingly firm, "without you massacring my family this time." A cruel smile further distorted his scarred face. "A mistake I intend to correct today. Leaving survivors is unforgivable." He took a step into the temple, and Arya saw his eyes fix on the lunar blade. "Fascinating," he murmured. "My dear brother left the instrument of his own destruction so unprotected, it almost seems like a trap." Arya's heart skipped a beat. Did he know? Had they been discovered? "But of course," continued Fenris, taking another step forward, "even if it is a trap, it hardly matters. At the moment of the eclipse, which begins—" He looked at the domed ceiling of the temple, where light was slowly diminishing as the moon gradually covered the sun. "Now, none of Draken's warriors will be a match for me and my followers." "Followers?" Arya repeated, a new fear growing in her chest. "You came alone." His laugh was like breaking glass. "Dear girl, do you really believe I would come unaccompanied to my brother's lair? At this very moment, dozens of my most loyal warriors are invading the mansion from 3 different fronts, including the tunnel that your precious king believes he has secretly trapped." Arya swallowed hard, trying not to show her growing panic. If Fenris knew about their defenses, if he had prepared countermeasures— "Not feeling so confident now, are you?" taunted Fenris, coming closer. "Tasting the fear, little human? It's delicious, isn't it? It was the same fear I saw in your little sister's eyes before." "Silence!" Arya screamed, her anger momentarily overcoming her fear. "Don't speak of her. Don't dare pronounce a word about my family." To her surprise, Fenris seemed momentarily shocked by her outburst. Then his smile returned, crueler than ever. "Interesting. You've developed some courage since our last encounter. A pity it won't help you now." He advanced another step, and Arya could feel his presence now, not just through the bond, but physically, a miasma of hatred and cruelty that seemed to contaminate the air around him. The light in the temple diminished as the eclipse progressed, gradually plunging them into penumbra. "Where is my dear brother?" asked Fenris, looking around theatrically. "Hidden like a coward while using you as bait? Typical of him. He always was the weak one, the hesitant one." "He is not weak," Arya replied, rising slowly, her hand still holding the silver thread connected to the dagger. "Compassion is not weakness." "Compassion?" He spat the word as if it were poison. "It was compassion that prevented him from killing me when he had the chance, and it will be compassion that destroys all of you today." The darkness of the eclipse was almost complete. Arya could now hear distant sounds of fighting coming from the main mansion. The plan was crumbling. Fenris knew everything, had prepared himself, and now they were all in danger. "Enough talk," said Fenris, his red eyes glowing in the penumbra like embers. "It's time to finish what I started in that cabin 3 years ago." He lunged at her with supernatural speed, his claws extended, aiming for her throat. In the last instant, Arya pulled the silver thread with all her strength, tearing the lunar blade from its pedestal and bringing it to her hand. Fenris stopped abruptly, his eyes fixed on the silver dagger Arya now wielded. "Clever," he growled, "but not clever enough." With a fluid motion, he dodged the path of the blade and grabbed Arya's wrist, twisting it with brutal force. Arya screamed in pain, feeling the dagger slip from her fingers and fall to the floor with a metallic clink. "Did you really think you could defeat me?" He mocked, his face inches from hers as he tightened his grip on her wrist until she heard the bones crackle. "A fragile human against an alpha?" The pain was excruciating, but through it, Arya felt something strange happening. Where Fenris was touching her, where his claws were beginning to penetrate her skin, the bond between them seemed to intensify exponentially. It was no longer just a tenuous connection, but an open bridge, a channel in both directions. And in that moment of crystalline clarity amid the pain, Arya understood what Draken had tried to teach her during all those training sessions. The bond wasn't just for receiving, it was for sending too. Closing her eyes, Arya concentrated all her will, all her anger, all her desire for justice in a single thought and pushed it with all her strength across that mental bridge, directly into Fenris's mind. "You will not win, not today, not ever." His eyes widened in shock when her thought invaded his mind. His hand loosened slightly, enough for Arya to break free and dive toward the fallen dagger. "What did you do?" he growled, staggering backward, his hands clutching his head as if trying to expel an invasive presence. "How did you—" Arya didn't respond. Instead, she continued sending thoughts, images, feelings, everything inside her. The pain of losing her family, the strength she had found to survive, the determination to prevent him from hurting anyone else. Fenris screamed, an animal sound of pain and rage, falling to his knees as he tried to block the mental assault. Through the bond, Arya could feel his confusion, his growing fear, the great predator suddenly vulnerable to his prey. "Impossible," he gasped, his red eyes now cloudy, unfocused. "No human should be capable." "She is not just a human," came Draken's voice from the entrance of the temple. "She is a blood-bonded, your greatest failure, your only mistake." Fenris raised his eyes to his brother, who advanced calmly in his direction, in the light of the eclipse making his face appear sculpted in marble. "Did you plan this?" accused Fenris, still fighting against the mental invasion. "Somehow, you knew about the bond?" "I did not plan it," replied Draken, his gaze briefly shifting to Arya with something like admiration. But I recognized when I saw it, something that you, in your arrogance, never could. Arya realized then that Draken carried no weapon at all. He had come to face his brother empty-handed at the moment when both were weakest due to the eclipse. "Even now you're too weak to kill me," taunted Fenris, managing to partially stand, his claws extended. "You always were, always will be." "It's not I who will kill you, brother," replied Draken calmly. "It's her." Fenris turned to Arya at the exact moment her hand found the hilt of the lunar blade. With a movement that seemed guided by something beyond herself, Arya raised the dagger and plunged it into the center of his chest, directly into his heart. His eyes widened in shock, and for a brief instant, the unnatural red gave way to the original green, the same green as Draken's eyes. For that fleeting moment, Arya saw not the monster, but the man he had been before darkness consumed him. "Brother," he whispered, his gaze fixed not on Arya, but on Draken, who had knelt beside him. "Go in peace now, Fenris," replied Draken, his voice choked with contained emotion. "May the moon guide your path home." A final breath escaped Fenris's lips before his body collapsed onto the temple floor. In that instant, Arya felt the bond between them break like a thread stretched beyond its limit, a sensation of liberation so intense she nearly fainted. Draken caught her before she fell, his strong arms enveloping her gently. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "You did it. We did it." Outside, they heard the sound of battle diminishing. Without their leader, without the force that united them, Fenris's followers quickly surrendered or fled. Light began to return to the temple as the eclipse reached its end, a new day emerging from the shadows. "And now?" Arya asked, exhausted, when she finally managed to speak. Draken moved away slightly to look into her eyes, his fingers gently pushing a strand of hair from her face. "Now you choose, Arya, as I promised. Stay or leave. Complete freedom." Arya looked at Fenris's fallen body, at the lunar blade still embedded in his chest, at the blood on her hands. She had killed the man who had destroyed her family, who had haunted her nightmares for years. She should feel triumph, satisfaction. Instead, she felt only a profound relief, as if a weight she didn't know she was carrying had finally been removed from her shoulders, and along with that relief, a clarity she had never felt before. "Stay," she answered simply, raising her hand to touch Draken's face. "As your equal, as your chosen companion, not purchased." A slow, genuine smile transformed Draken's normally grave face. "Are you sure? The life of an alpha's companion is not easy, even in times of peace." "Since when do I seek the easy path?" Arya retorted, a small smile curving her lips. "I am a survivor too, remember? The only one who resisted the great Fenris." "The only one who destroyed him," corrected Draken, a gleam of pride in his eyes. "The human who defeated an alpha." When they left the temple, the sun was shining again with full force, the eclipse having ended completely. The mansion was damaged by the battle but standing. Wounded warriors were being treated in the central courtyard, while Fenris's captured followers awaited judgment, disarmed and under guard. Seraphina ran to them, a superficial cut on her cheek, but otherwise unharmed. "King Draken, we managed to repel the attack when news of Fenris's death spread. Many simply surrendered." "Casualties?" asked Draken, his tone returning to that of the responsible leader of his people. 7 dead, 20 wounded, but all will survive," she reported, before her golden eyes fell on Arya with new respect. "So it's true? You really killed him?" Arya nodded silently, still uncomfortable with the attention and recognition. "A human?" whispered Seraphina, marveled. "Not just a human," corrected Draken, his arm encircling Arya's waist in a gesture of pride and possession that surprisingly didn't bother her. "My companion." Seraphina's eyes widened, but her shock quickly gave way to a smile of understanding. "I always knew," she murmured, bowing respectfully before moving away to help with the wounded. In the weeks that followed, the Red Peak Pack transformed. With the threat of Fenris removed, Draken began to implement changes that, according to him, he had always desired, but that the constant vigilance against his brother made impossible. Stronger alliances with neighboring human communities, complete abolition of the companion auction system, integration of humans who wished to voluntarily join the pack. Not everyone accepted the changes well, of course. Some more traditionalist members left the pack in protest. Others remained but resisted silently, accustomed to seeing humans only as prey or property. Arya's place as the king's official companion was formalized in an ancient ceremony under the next full moon. It wasn't a human marriage, nor a simple coronation. It was something more primitive, more spiritual, a recognition before the ancestors and the moon that their souls were bound by mutual choice, not by force or obligation. "The pendant," said Draken on the night of the ceremony, when they were finally alone in their chambers, touching the small silver crescent that Arya still always carried with her. "It's remarkably similar to the symbol of our pack." Arya smiled, looking at the object that had accompanied her since the loss of her family. "My grandmother said it belonged to her mother, and her mother before that. A family heirloom." "Perhaps it's not a coincidence," he suggested, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Perhaps fate bound us together long before we realized." "Fate?" Arya teased softly, leaning in to kiss the strong line of his jaw. "I thought wolfmen were creatures of nature, not mystics who believe in destiny." He laughed, that rare and precious laugh that increasingly became part of their daily life. "The line between nature and destiny is thinner than humans like to believe," he responded, echoing his own words from that day in the temple. On the first full moon after the ceremony, Arya had the opportunity to see Draken in his wolf form for the first time, not in the chaotic fragments of a battle, but in all his tranquil majesty, immense, with black fur like night and green eyes that maintained the same intensity as his human form. Instead of fear, Arya felt only admiration and a strange recognition, as if she had always known that part of him. "One day," he said after returning to human form, "if you desire, I can share the gift. The bite under the full moon. Transformation." Arya remained silent for a moment, considering. Part of her still associated the transformation with the monsters who had destroyed her family. But another part, the part that now knew Draken, that loved both the man and the wolf inside him, was curious, tempted. "One day, perhaps," she finally replied, "but for now, I'm happy being the human who won the heart of the Alpha King." He smiled, pulling her into his arms. "The human no one wanted at the auction," he murmured against her lips, "until I saw her and recognized what all others were too foolish to see." "And what did you see?" Arya asked, wrapping her arms around his neck. "A survivor," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "A warrior, a queen." And as the moon shone over them, reflecting on her silver crescent pendant like a silent witness, Arya knew she had found something she never expected to have again after the tragedy. A home, a family, a place where she belonged. Not as prisoner or property, not as a trophy or a weapon, but as an equal, chosen and loved by a king who had seen strength where others saw only fragility. Like the crescent moon that, even in its thinnest form, still reflects light, Arya had found her own radiance in the shadows of Red Peak, transforming her pain into power, her scar into strength. And after all, wasn't that the true magic? Not spells or ancient legends, but the ability to be reborn from the ashes of our past, to transform our deepest wounds into our greatest strength. Looking at the scar on her arm, no longer a reminder of horror, but a symbol of survival, Arya smiled at Draken, her king, her companion, her equal. "My queen," he whispered, as if reading her thoughts, sealing the promise with a kiss that spoke of nights past and all the mornings yet to come. The morning after the defeat of Fenris dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the master chambers Arya now shared with Draken. She woke to find his side of the bed empty, though still warm. Outside, the sounds of reconstruction filled the air. Hammers pounding, voices calling instructions, the occasional scrape of stone against stone as the damaged portions of Red Peak Mansion were rebuilt. Arya stretched, feeling the pleasant soreness in her muscles from the previous night's passion. The past weeks had transformed her life completely. From auction lot to warrior, from captive to queen, a metamorphosis she could never have imagined when she stood trembling on that auction block. She rose and walked to the balcony, wrapping herself in a robe of fine black silk embroidered with silver crescents. From this height, she could see the full expanse of Red Peak territory stretching before her, dense forests, rocky cliffs, and in the far distance, the smoke from human settlements that now existed in tentative alliance with the pack rather than in fear. "Admiring our kingdom?" Draken's voice came from behind her, warm and rich. He approached, dressed in simple attire that belied his royal status, carrying a tray with breakfast. "Our kingdom," Arya repeated, savoring the word as he set the tray on a small table. "It still feels strange to think of it that way." "It is yours as much as mine now," he said, pulling her gently into his arms. "The pack has accepted you. Even the most traditional members are beginning to see the wisdom in our union." Arya leaned against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Not all of them," she said quietly. "I've seen how some still look at me, the human who dared to rise above her station." Draken's arms tightened around her protectively. "They will learn," he said simply, "or they will leave. Red Peak is changing, and those who cannot change with it have no place here." They sat to enjoy the breakfast he had brought: fresh bread, honey, fruits, and a pot of fragrant tea. Through the open doors, Arya could hear the activity in the courtyard below growing more intense. "The preparations for the summit are proceeding well," Draken remarked, following her gaze. "The other alphas will arrive tomorrow." The Interpack Summit was the first of its kind, a gathering of all 7 major wolf packs to discuss the new accords Draken had proposed, including the abolition of the companion auctions and formal peace treaties with human settlements. It was bold, revolutionary, and dangerous. "Do you really believe they'll agree to end the auctions?" Arya asked, her voice tinged with hope and doubt in equal measure. Draken's expression grew serious. "Some will, others will resist." "But with the Blood Mountain and Silver Lake packs already supporting our position, we have a strong foundation." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the silver band she now wore, his mark of commitment, forged from the same metal as her crescent pendant. "This is just the beginning, Arya. For generations, wolfmen and humans have existed in a cycle of fear and domination. We can break that cycle." His words were interrupted by a sharp knock at the chamber door. Seraphina entered, her usual composed demeanor replaced by obvious tension. "My lord, my lady," she bowed slightly, "forgive the intrusion, but Counselor Thaddeus requests an immediate audience. He says it's urgent, concerning the human settlements on the eastern border." Draken and Arya exchanged a glance. The eastern settlements had been the most resistant to the new alliance, harboring bitter memories of Fenris's attacks. "We'll receive him in the study," Draken decided, rising from his chair. Counselor Thaddeus was already pacing the study when they arrived, his elderly frame moving with surprising energy. His white hair was disheveled, as if he had rushed without taking time to properly groom. "My lord," he began immediately, barely acknowledging Arya with a perfunctory nod. "Disturbing reports from our border patrols. The eastern human settlements are amassing weapons, silver-tipped spears, arrows, even some primitive firearms." Draken's posture stiffened. "Are you certain?" 3 separate scouts confirmed it, Thaddeus replied grimly. "They appear to be preparing for war, not peace." Arya stepped forward. "That doesn't make sense. We've sent envoys with offers of alliance. What reason would they have to arm themselves now?" Thaddeus's gaze shifted to her, his expression a mixture of condescension and reluctant respect. "Forgive me, my lady, but not all humans share your adaptability. Generations of fear don't disappear with a few weeks of diplomacy." "Or perhaps," came a new voice from the doorway, "they've received information that makes them doubt our intentions." Magnus Bloodfang, A broad-shouldered wolf man with russet hair streaked with gray entered without waiting for permission. As head of the border guards and a respected warrior, he enjoyed certain privileges, but his intrusion was still a breach of protocol. "Explain yourself, Magnus," Draken commanded, his voice taking on the edge of authority Arya had first heard in the auction house. "3 days ago, a caravan of traders was attacked while crossing our territory," Magnus reported. "The survivors fled to the eastern settlements with tales of wolfmen raiders. They believe we've broken our word." "That's impossible," Draken growled. "No pack member would dare attack humans under my protection." Magnus spread his hands. "Nevertheless, it happened. The question is, who would benefit from sabotaging your peace efforts?" A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications of his question sank in. Arya felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. "You believe there are still those loyal to Fenris among us," she said, giving voice to the unspoken suspicion. "Fenris is dead," Thaddeus interjected sharply. "The human girl saw to that. But his ideas, his beliefs, those live on in the minds of some who consider these changes too radical, too fast." Draken moved to the window, his reflection in the glass revealing the struggle for control evident on his face. When he turned back to them, his eyes had hardened with resolution. "Magnus, double the patrols along the eastern border, but with strict orders not to engage unless attacked. Send our most diplomatic envoys to the settlements with assurances and offerings of restitution for the caravan." He paused, then added with deadly calm, "And begin a quiet investigation into who might have orchestrated this attack. I want names, not suspicions." "And the summit?" Thaddeus asked cautiously. "Should we postpone given these developments?" "No." Draken's response was immediate and firm. "Postponing would only show weakness and uncertainty. The summit proceeds as planned." When Thaddeus and Magnus had departed, Arya approached Draken, concerned by the tension evident in every line of his body. "You believe Fenris's sympathizers are behind this," she said softly. He nodded, his expression grim. "My brother may be dead, but his shadow still falls over Red Peak. There are those who would rather see everything we've built burn than accept a world where humans and wolfmen stand as equals." "Then we must find them," Arya declared, her determination matching his, "before they destroy any chance of peace." Draken turned to her, his eyes softening as he cupped her face in his hands. "We will. But I need you to be cautious, Arya. If they would attack innocent traders to provoke conflict, they would not hesitate to strike at you, the living symbol of everything they oppose." Arya recognized the fear beneath his concern, the memory of nearly losing her during the confrontation with Fenris still fresh in his mind. She covered his hands with her own. "I survived your brother," she reminded him gently. "I can survive his followers." The arrival of the other pack leaders the next day transformed Red Peak Mansion into a hive of activity. Servants rushed through corridors, preparing guest chambers. Kitchens worked at full capacity, producing elaborate feasts, and guards maintained a heightened state of vigilance. Arya observed the processions from the private balcony overlooking the main courtyard, Serafina beside her providing commentary on each arrival. "That's Alpha Sylvana of the Silver Lake Pack," she noted, as a striking woman with platinum blonde hair dismounted from a sleek black horse. "She's been an ally of Draken's since before the war with Fenris, progressive in her views, though her pack is smaller than most." A caravan of vehicles arrived next, disgorging a contingent of wolfmen in deep green attire. At their center walked an elderly man who moved with the deliberate care of great age, yet commanded obvious respect. "Elder Rowan of the Verdant Vale," Serafina explained, "the oldest living alpha. His opinions carry immense weight, though his health is failing. The man beside him is his son and heir, Aspen." Arya studied the younger wolfman with interest. Unlike his father's weathered features, Aspen's face was smooth and handsome, but there was something calculating in his eyes that made her uneasy. "The Blood Mountain Pack approaches," Serafina continued as a group of riders appeared on the road, their mounts powerful and adorned with red trappings. "Alpha Crawl is Draken's strongest supporter among the packs. They share a hatred of the old ways, though for different reasons. The Blood Mountain Alpha was massive, even for a wolf man, with a beard like a flame cascading down his chest and arms covered in ritual scars. His laugh boomed across the courtyard as he dismounted and greeted Draken with a bear-like embrace. "The Frost River Pack won't arrive until tomorrow," Seraphina added. "And the Desert Wind Pack sent word they may not attend at all. They're the most isolated and traditional of all the packs." "And the last pack?" Arya asked, noticing Seraphina's omission. A shadow crossed the woman's face. "The Shadow Wood Pack. They were Fenris's closest allies before the war. Their new alpha, Lysander, was his beta. He claims to have renounced Fenris's ways, but—" She trailed off meaningfully. Before Arya could press for more information, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention back to the courtyard. A procession of riders in dark gray cloaks entered, moving with disciplined precision. At their head rode a lean wolf-man with silver-streaked black hair and sharp features. "Speak of the devil," Seraphina murmured. "Lysander of the Shadow Wood." Arya watched as Draken greeted the newcomer with formal correctness, but none of the warmth he had shown the other alphas. Even from a distance, she could sense the tension between them. "I should join Draken," she decided, turning from the balcony. "The formal introductions will begin soon." Seraphina caught her arm, concern evident in her golden eyes. "Be careful around Lysander, my lady. He was more than Fenris's beta. He was his confidant, some say his conscience. If anyone knows the darkest secrets of your mate's brother, it's him." The great hall had been transformed for the occasion, with banners representing each pack hanging from the rafters and the long tables arranged in a horseshoe shape to allow each alpha equal prominence. Arya entered from a side door as Draken was completing the formal welcomes. All eyes turned to her as she crossed to take her place beside Draken. She had chosen her attire carefully for this moment, a gown of deepest black with silver embroidery that echoed the symbols of Red Peak, but with subtle elements of human design. Neither fully wolfman nor fully human, but something new, a bridge between worlds. "My companions," Draken announced, taking her hand as she reached him. "May I present Arya Moonshadow of Red Peak, my mate and equal." A murmur ran through the assembled alphas at his choice of words. Equal was not a term traditionally applied to human companions. Alpha Sylvana was the first to step forward, clasping Arya's hands in a gesture of sisterhood. "The blood-bonded who defeated Fenris," she said warmly. "Your reputation precedes you, Arya Moonshadow. Silver Lake welcomes you as kin." Crawl of Blood Mountain followed with a bow that would have seemed comical from such a massive figure were it not for the genuine respect in his eyes. "Any woman who can drive a blade through Fenris Silverclaw's black heart has earned the right to stand among alphas," he declared. One by one, the other pack leaders acknowledged her, some with warmth, others with reserved politeness. Elder Rowan studied her with rheumy but perceptive eyes before offering a gentle nod. His son Aspen bowed with perfect correctness, though his smile never reached his eyes. Finally, only Lysander remained. The Shadowwood Alpha approached slowly, his gaze intense and evaluating. Up close, Arya could see the resemblance to Fenris in his lean features and the way he carried himself. "So," he said softly, his voice like silk over steel, "this is the human who changed the course of our history. Fascinating." He extended his hand, palm up, a traditional gesture among wolfmen that invited scent exchange. It was also, Arya knew from her lessons in pack protocol, a subtle test. Would the human mate of an alpha know and observe proper etiquette? Without hesitation, she placed her hand in his, allowing him to turn it palm up and bring it close to his face without quite touching. He inhaled deeply, then released her hand with a slight smile. "Blood and silver," he remarked cryptically, "an unusual combination." Before Arya could respond, Draken smoothly drew her back to his side. "The formal council begins tomorrow," he announced to the assembled alphas. "Tonight we feast and renew old bonds of friendship." The feast that followed was elaborate, with course after course of delicacies from all 7 territories. Arya, seated beside Draken at the high table, found herself the object of intense curiosity. Between polite conversations about territorial matters and pack histories, she felt the weight of evaluation in every exchange. Alpha Sylvana proved a valuable ally, sharing stories of her own struggles as the only female alpha that subtly highlighted the parallels with Arya's position. Crawl of Blood Mountain was blunter in his approach, peppering her with questions about the battle with Fenris that bordered on impropriety, but were asked with such honest admiration she couldn't take offense. It was Elder Rowan who surprised her most, requesting that she join him for a quiet moment away from the raucous feast. Draken nodded his permission, and Arya followed the ancient alpha to a small antechamber where the noise of celebration was muted. "Forgive an old wolf his need for occasional peace," he said, easing himself onto a cushioned bench. "These gatherings grow more taxing with each passing year." "No forgiveness needed," Arya assured him, taking a seat nearby. "I find it overwhelming myself." Rowan studied her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see past surfaces. "You are a remarkable woman, Arya Moonshadow, not merely for killing Fenris, though that alone would secure your place in our histories, but for what you represent." "And what is that?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Change," he said simply. "Necessary, inevitable change." He sighed, his gaze turning inward. "I have lived long enough to see 3 great shifts in the balance between wolfmen and humans. Each came with blood and pain. Each left us diminished in some ways, strengthened in others." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to ensure privacy. "What Draken proposes, true equality, an end to the auction system, open alliance rather than dominance. This is not merely change, it is revolution. And revolutions have their casualties." Arya felt a chill at his words. "You believe there will be resistance." "I know there will be," he corrected gently. "Already there are whispers, plots. The attack on the caravan is just the beginning." Arya's surprise must have shown on her face, for Rowan smiled sadly. "Little escapes my notice, even now. My son believes I am blind to the currents running beneath the surface of pack politics, but age brings its own kind of vision." "Then you know who was behind the attack?" Arya pressed. Rowan shook his head. "Not with certainty, but I know the scent of ambition and fear mixed together. It permeates this gathering." His gnarled hand reached out to cover hers, the gesture surprisingly tender. "Watch over him, blood-bonded. Draken Silverclaw is the future our kind needs, but those who cling to the past will not surrender their power willingly." Before Arya could respond, the door opened and Aspen entered, his handsome face composed in a mask of filial concern. "Father, you should rest before the exertions of tomorrow's council," he urged, offering his arm for support. Elder Rowan patted Arya's hand once more before allowing his son to help him rise. "Remember what I said, child. The future hangs in the balance." As they departed, Arya remained seated, turning over the old alpha's warning in her mind. His words confirmed her own suspicions. Somewhere in this gathering of the most powerful wolfmen in the territories, enemies were circling. When she finally returned to the feast, she found Draken deep in conversation with Alpha Crawl, their heads bent close together in serious discussion. Rather than interrupt, she circled the perimeter of the hall, observing the interactions between the visiting packs with new alertness. Near a pillar, partially concealed by shadows, she noticed Lysander of Shadowwood engaged in what appeared to be a casual conversation with Aspen. Something in their body language, the careful distance maintained, the way they barely looked at each other while speaking, triggered her instincts. This was not a chance encounter, but a planned meeting disguised as one. Arya drifted closer, pretending to admire a tapestry depicting an ancient wolfmen legend. She couldn't hear their words over the noise of the feast, but she caught Aspen nodding subtly before they separated, each moving in different directions without a formal farewell. A servant approached with a tray of wine goblets, and Arya accepted one, using the moment to scan the room for other suspicious interactions. Her gaze fell on Magnus Bloodfang, who stood near the main entrance, ostensibly supervising security. His attention, however, seemed fixed on Lysander's retreating figure, his expression unreadable. So many threads, Arya thought, so many possible conspiracies. Who among these proud, powerful beings truly supported Draken's vision, and who sought to undermine it? She sipped her wine, the rich flavor barely registering as her mind worked through the possibilities. The blood bond with Fenris was severed with his death, but sometimes she wished for its clarity, the ability to see into the minds of enemies, to know their plans before they could act. A prickling sensation at the base of her neck drew her attention to the high table. Draken was watching her, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. She offered him a reassuring smile, but his eyes narrowed slightly, sensing her unease. Before he could come to her, Counselor Thaddeus approached, leaning close to whisper something in Draken's ear. Whatever news he delivered caused a momentary hardening of the Alpha's features before his diplomatic mask returned. Arya began making her way back to the high table, but found her path intercepted by Lysander, who appeared beside her with the silent grace characteristic of his kind. "Lady Arya," he greeted her with a slight inclination of his head. "I hope I find you enjoying the festivities." "Lord Lysander," she returned with equal formality. "Red Peak is honored by your presence." A smile touched his lips, but failed to warm his eyes. "Such perfect courtesy. Draken has taught you our ways well." "I'm a quick study," Arya replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Indeed. From auction block to Alpha's mate in mere months, a remarkable ascension." His tone made the words more accusation than compliment. "From survivor to warrior," she corrected gently. "The auction is an irrelevant detail in my journey, soon to be a relic of the past for all humans." Lysander's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Ah, yes, the great reform. Tell me, Lady Arya, in your vision of this brave new world, what becomes of packs who depend on the companion system for their bloodlines? Not all territories are as blessed as Red Peak, with compatible humans willing to join voluntarily." The question was a trap, Arya realized. Any answer would reveal either ignorance of pack politics or betray the extent of her influence over Draken's policies. "The summit will address these concerns," she replied carefully. "All voices will be heard, all needs considered. True reform must work for everyone, not merely for those with power to enforce their preferences." Lysander studied her for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. "Diplomatic, as well as decorative. No wonder Draken values you so highly." Before Arya could respond to the backhanded compliment, Draken materialized at her side, his hand coming to rest possessively at the small of her back. "I see you've met my mate, Lysander," he said, his tone pleasant but carrying an undercurrent of warning. "Indeed, we were discussing the complexities of your proposed reforms." Lysander's smile remained fixed. "Lady Arya has quite the political mind for a human." "For anyone," Draken corrected smoothly, "which is why she will be participating in tomorrow's council as my equal partner." The declaration hung in the air between them, a challenge disguised as information. No human had ever been permitted to attend an Alpha Council, let alone participate as an equal. Lysander's composure slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine surprise before his mask returned. "How progressive of you, Draken. I look forward to witnessing this historic occasion." With a formal bow, he retreated, disappearing into the crowd of revelers. Draken's hand remained at Arya's back, his touch conveying tension his face did not show. "What did Thaddeus tell you?" she asked quietly, turning to face him. "I saw him whisper something that troubled you." Draken glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard before responding in a low voice. "Another attack, this time on one of our own patrols near the western border. 2 guards wounded, 1 seriously." "Wolfmen attacking wolfmen?" Arya frowned. "That's even more direct than the caravan." "And more concerning," Draken agreed grimly. "The wounded guard reported their attackers wore masks, but one called another by name, a name belonging to a Shadowwood pack member." Arya's mind flashed to the secretive conversation she had witnessed between Lysander and Aspen. "Lysander," she whispered. "Could he be behind both attacks?" "Possibly, though it seems too obvious." Draken's eyes scanned the hall, settling briefly on various guests. "If I were orchestrating opposition, I would work through intermediaries, maintain plausible deniability." "We need proof," Arya said decisively. Before the council tomorrow, we need to know who our true enemies are. Draken nodded, his expression resolute. I've already sent Magnus to investigate the attack site, search for any evidence that might identify the perpetrators definitively. Magnus? Arya couldn't keep the note of concern from her voice. Are you certain he can be trusted? Her mate's gaze sharpened. You suspect Magnus? Why? Not suspect exactly, she clarified. But I saw him watching Lysander earlier with unusual intensity. There's some connection there, though I can't determine its nature. Draken considered this, his brow furrowing. Magnus served under Fenris before the war, as did many of our older warriors. He joined my side early in the conflict, proved his loyalty numerous times. But you're right to be cautious. Old allegiances can run deep. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, a public display of affection that drew glances from around the hall. This is why I need you beside me tomorrow. Your human perspective sees patterns we might miss, caught as we are in centuries of pack politics. The feast continued late into the night, but Arya and Draken retired earlier than would normally be expected of hosts. The pretext was preparation for the following day's council, but both knew they needed privacy to discuss strategy away from prying eyes and keen wolfmen hearing. Their chambers had been swept for eavesdropping devices earlier, a precaution that would have seemed paranoid before the recent attacks, but now felt necessary. Even so, Draken led Arya to the balcony before speaking freely, the night wind carrying their words away from any potential listeners. Tomorrow will define the future of all 7 packs, he said, gazing out over the moonlit territory. If the council agrees to the new accords, we begin a new chapter in our history. If they reject them, they won't, Arya asserted, moving to stand beside him. Sylvana and Krall support you openly. Elder Rowan seems sympathetic to the cause, if his words to me are any indication. Rowan is a traditionalist at heart, Draken cautioned. He may recognize the necessity of change without being willing to embrace it fully, and his son Aspen whispers constantly in his ear, urging caution and delay. 3 packs for, 1 against with Lysander, Arya calculated. The Desert Wind Pack's absence works in our favor. They would certainly oppose. That leaves Frost River as the deciding voice. And they are notoriously pragmatic, Draken added. They will support whichever side appears strongest, most likely to prevail in the long term. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his, which is why these attacks are so precisely timed. They're meant to create an impression of instability, to suggest that my leadership cannot maintain peace, even within my own territory. Arya squeezed his hands, feeling the tension in them. Then we must convince them otherwise. Show them that these are the desperate actions of a minority clinging to outdated beliefs, not evidence of a fundamental flaw in your vision. A ghost of a smile touched Draken's lips. My practical queen, always focused on solutions rather than problems. One of us needs to be, she teased gently, trying to lighten his mood. Otherwise, you'd brood yourself into paralysis. He pulled her into his embrace, burying his face in her hair. What would I do without you? He murmured, the question only half rhetorical. Arya held him tightly, offering comfort through touch. She knew the weight he carried, not just the responsibility for his own pack, but the burden of reshaping centuries of wolfmen society. Any failure would be measured in blood, human and wolf alike. You won't have to find out, she promised. We face this together, whatever comes. They remained on the balcony until the moon reached its zenith, discussing contingencies and strategies for the council. When they finally sought their bed, Draken's lovemaking had an edge of desperation, as if he sought to imprint the feeling of her beneath his hands, the taste of her on his tongue, against some future loss he dared not name. Arya matched his intensity, pouring reassurance and conviction into every touch. Through physical communion, they renewed the bond between them, stronger than ceremony, deeper than words. Whatever conspiracies swirled around them, this connection remained their anchor. As Draken finally drifted into sleep beside her, Arya remained awake, watching the play of moonlight across his features. Tomorrow would indeed define their future, but not in the way anyone expected, not even her mate. For Arya had recognized something in Elder Rowan's warning that she had not shared with Draken. The old Alpha had spoken of 3 great shifts in the balance between wolfmen and humans during his lifetime. Research in the Red Peak archives had revealed 2: the Great Hunt 3 centuries ago, when humans nearly eradicated wolfmen, and the Crimson Pact a century later that established the auction system as restitution. But the 3rd shift remained unrecorded in any text Arya could find. Whatever cataclysm had occurred within Elder Rowan's memory, it was either too recent or too terrible to be committed to written history. And that missing piece of the puzzle might be the key to understanding the forces arrayed against them now. Slipping carefully from the bed, Arya donned a robe and moved silently to the antechamber where ancient texts from the Red Peak archives awaited her review. If sleep would not come, she would use the quiet hours of night to seek answers. The future indeed hung in the balance, but Arya was determined to tip the scales in their favor. Dawn broke over Red Peak with ominous clouds gathering on the horizon, as if nature itself acknowledged the gravity of the day ahead. Arya stood before the ornate mirror in their chambers, Seraphina helping her into ceremonial attire designed specifically for the Summit Council. The dress was a masterwork of symbolism, predominantly silver with black accents, incorporating both wolfmen traditions and human craftsmanship. At the throat, her grandmother's crescent moon pendant gleamed against the fabric. "Did you sleep at all, my lady?" Seraphina asked softly, noting the shadows beneath Arya's eyes. "A few hours," Arya replied, though in truth she had spent most of the night poring over ancient texts, searching for clues to Elder Rowan's mysterious 3rd shift in wolf-human relations. Her research had yielded tantalizing fragments, oblique references to the Sundering roughly 60 years ago, but no details of what had occurred or why it remained largely undocumented. The most intriguing discovery had been a brief mention of a human organization called the Lunar Guardians, apparently active during the same period. "The king awaits you in the antechamber," Seraphina said, making final adjustments to Arya's hair, worn loose with intricate braids woven with silver threads, a style that honored both human and wolfmen traditions. "The other alphas have already gathered in the council hall." Arya nodded, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Thank you, Seraphina. Not just for this," she gestured at her appearance, "but for your guidance since I arrived. Few pack members welcomed me as openly as you have." Seraphina's golden eyes softened. "My father taught me that change is the only constant in this world. Those who resist it are doomed to be broken by it." She squeezed Arya's hand briefly. "You and Draken represent the future my people need, even if some cannot yet see it." The antechamber outside the council hall thrummed with tension when Arya entered. Draken stood conversing with Thaddeus and Magnus, their expressions grave. He wore formal attire befitting his status, a black suit of traditional cut but modern styling, silver accents matching those on Arya's gown, and around his neck a ceremonial collar bearing the Red Peak emblem. He looked up as she approached, his features softening momentarily. "You look like the living embodiment of our vision," he said quietly, taking her hands in his. "The perfect balance of strength and grace." "Any news from the investigation?" Arya asked, keeping her voice low. Magnus answered, his tone carefully neutral. "Inconclusive. The attack site showed signs of multiple assailants, but no definitive evidence linking them to any specific pack." "Convenient," Arya remarked, not bothering to hide her suspicion. "And the wounded guard who heard the Shadowwood name?" "His condition has worsened," Thaddeus interjected. "The healers keep him sedated. He cannot testify before the council." Again, convenient timing, Arya thought, though she kept this observation to herself. "What of the eastern settlements? Any response to our peace overtures?" "Their leaders have agreed to meet," Draken replied, "but only after the summit concludes. They wait to see which way the wind blows." A gong sounded from within the council hall, the traditional call to convene. Draken offered his arm to Arya, the gesture both affectionate and symbolic. Together, they would enter as equals, a visual representation of the new order they proposed. "The Council of Alphas has convened for 10,000 years," he murmured as they approached the ornate doors. "Never before has a human stood among them as an equal participant. History watches us today, Arya." "Then let's give history something worth remembering," she replied, her chin lifting with determination. The council hall fell silent as they entered. Unlike the boisterous feast of the previous evening, the atmosphere now was solemn, almost sacred. 7 great chairs formed a circle around a central hearth where ceremonial flames burned blue with special salts, 1 throne for each alpha. Behind each chair stood the beta and chief counselor of their respective packs. Draken led Arya to the Red Peak throne, but instead of taking his seat, he remained standing, still holding her hand. "Alphas of the 7 territories," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. "For 10 millennia, our kind has gathered thus to decide matters of greatest importance. Today, we face perhaps the most momentous decision in our long history, whether to continue as we have or to forge a new path forward." He gestured to Arya beside him. "As you all know, my mate Arya Moonshadow stands with me not merely as consort, but as equal partner in leadership of Red Peak. Her presence here today represents the future I envision, one where humans and wolfmen build alliance through mutual respect rather than domination and fear." A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembly. Alpha Sylvana nodded approvingly, while Crawl of Blood Mountain thumped his massive fist against his chest in a gesture of support. Elder Rowan's expression remained unreadable, his son Aspen leaning down to whisper in his ear. Lysander watched with calculating eyes. "Some will call this blasphemy against our traditions," Draken continued. "But I ask you, what is the purpose of tradition if not to guide us toward survival and prosperity? The old ways served their purpose in their time, but that time has passed." He paused, his gaze sweeping the circle. "The companion auctions, the subjugation of humans, the isolation of our territories, these practices were born of fear following the Great Hunt, when humans nearly eradicated our kind. They were necessary, perhaps, to ensure our survival then, but now they threaten the very future they were meant to protect." Alpha Lysander leaned forward, his posture radiating skepticism. "Pretty words, Draken. But what exactly are you proposing? That we simply throw open our territories to humans? Release all companions? Reveal ourselves fully to a species that once hunted us to the brink of extinction?" "Not overnight," Arya spoke up, her clear voice causing several heads to turn in surprise. "Change requires careful transition. What we propose is a phased approach, beginning with the immediate end of forced companionship and auctions, replaced with voluntary unions. Territorial boundaries would remain, but with established trade routes and diplomatic channels." Elder Rowan raised a gnarled hand, requesting recognition. When Draken nodded, the ancient Alpha spoke with surprising strength. "The young queen speaks wisdom. Abrupt change invites chaos. Measured steps, however, may lead us to a better future without sacrificing security." "The Blood Mountain supports this vision," Krall declared, rising to his feet. "For too long we have lived apart from the world, growing weaker with each generation. New blood, new ideas, new alliances, these are the path to strength." "Silver Lake concurs," Sylvana added smoothly. "Our pack has already begun limited integration with neighboring human settlements. The results have been promising: increased prosperity, cultural exchange, even voluntary unions between our kinds." Aspen, standing behind his father's throne, stepped forward. "With respect to my father and esteemed colleagues, I must urge caution. The incidents of recent days, attacks on caravans, wounded guards, suggest that not all are ready for such sweeping changes. Perhaps a longer period of consideration." "Delay serves only those who oppose progress," Krall interrupted bluntly. "These attacks are clearly the work of those who fear change. All the more reason to proceed decisively." Lysander's cold laugh cut through the tension. "How convenient for Draken that any opposition can be dismissed as fear or sabotage. Tell me, Alpha of Red Peak, if your vision is so clearly beneficial, why must it be forced upon those who see its flaws?" "No one speaks of force," Draken replied evenly. The accords would establish framework and timeline, but each pack would implement changes according to their own circumstances. And those who choose not to implement them? Lysander pressed. Will they be labeled enemies of progress, outcast from the Alliance of Seven? The question hung in the air, exposing the central tension of the proposal. Before Draken could respond, the doors of the council hall burst open. A guard staggered in, blood staining his uniform, his face ashen with shock. "My lords," he gasped, "the eastern settlements, they're under attack!" Chaos erupted as the Alphas rose, demanding details. Draken strode to the wounded guard, Arya close behind. "Report," he commanded. "What happened?" "Wolfmen raiders," the guard managed between labored breaths. "Dozens of them, attacking 3 settlements simultaneously. They wear Red Peak colors, my lord, but they're slaughtering civilians, setting homes ablaze." A collective gasp swept through the hall. Lysander's voice cut through the tumult. "So much for peaceful transition. While we debate abstractions, Draken's warriors murder the very humans he claims to champion." "That's a lie!" Draken roared, his composure cracking. "No Red Peak warrior would attack civilians, especially not on my orders." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Aspen interjected smoothly. "Perhaps in your zeal for change, you've lost control of your own pack." Arya stepped forward, her mind racing. "This is clearly a setup," she declared, her voice clear and firm. "Someone aims to derail the council and discredit Draken by committing atrocities in his name." "A convenient explanation," Lysander remarked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Almost as convenient as Fenris appearing just when you needed to consolidate power." The accusation struck like a physical blow. Arya saw Draken's eyes flash dangerously, the wolf within him stirring at the insult. Before he could respond, she placed a restraining hand on his arm. "We can debate motivations later," she said firmly. "Right now, innocent people are dying. The council must respond, together, to stop the violence and demonstrate unity." Elder Rowan nodded slowly. "The human speaks wisdom again. Our first duty is to protect the innocent, human and wolf alike." "I propose a joint force," Arya continued, seizing the moment. "Warriors from each pack, led by their alphas, to end these attacks and apprehend the perpetrators. Let the 7 act as one, proving our commitment to justice transcends old divisions." Krall thumped his chest in approval. "Blood Mountain stands ready." "Silver Lake as well," Sylvana declared. One by one, the other alphas voiced their support, all except Lysander, who remained coldly silent. "And Shadowwood?" Draken challenged. "Will you stand with the 7 or apart?" Lysander's thin lips curved in a mirthless smile. "Far be it from me to oppose the consensus. Shadowwood will contribute warriors to this effort, though I wonder who will lead Red Peak's forces while you attend to council matters." "I will," Arya stated before Draken could speak, drawing surprised looks from around the room. "You?" Aspen's incredulity was barely veiled. "A human leading wolfmen warriors?" "A blood-bonded who defeated Fenris," Krall corrected gruffly. "I'd follow her into battle without hesitation." Draken studied Arya's face, reading the determination there. After a moment, he nodded. "My mate will lead our response force, with Magnus Bloodfang as her second. I will remain to continue the council. We cannot allow this provocation to derail our purpose." Within the hour, warriors from all 7 packs assembled in the courtyard, grouped under their respective banners. Arya had changed from her ceremonial gown into practical attire suited for riding and potential combat, black leather reinforced at vulnerable points, with silver accents identifying her as Red Peak leadership. At her hip hung a short sword of silver alloy, less pure than the lunar blade, but still deadly to wolfmen if necessary. The weapon had been Draken's gift after her victory over Fenris, though she had hoped never to use it against living opponents. Magnus organized the Red Peak contingent, his efficiency impressive despite Arya's lingering concerns about his loyalty. 50 warriors would ride with her, a substantial force, though not enough to deplete the mansion's defenses. As final preparations were made, Draken joined her beside her mount, a midnight black horse chosen for its speed and courage under fire. "This is a trap," he said quietly, adjusting the fastenings on her armor with practiced hands. "You realize that?" "Of course," Arya replied, checking her weapons. "Someone wants to separate us, weaken the council, provoke conflict between packs and settlements. The question is, who benefits most from such chaos?" "Lysander is the obvious suspect," Draken mused. "Yet his cooperation seems too ready, his antagonism too open. If he orchestrated this, why join the response force?" "To monitor the situation," Arya suggested, "or to ensure certain evidence isn't discovered." She hesitated, then added, "But I'm not convinced he acts alone. The coordination required for simultaneous attacks, the inside knowledge of Red Peak patrols." "You still suspect Magnus?" It wasn't a question. Arya met Draken's gaze steadily. "I suspect everyone until proven loyal. That's how I survived 3 years after losing my family. Trust selectively, verify ruthlessly." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My warrior queen." He cupped her face gently. "Be careful out there. Whoever engineered this crisis won't hesitate to remove you permanently if given the opportunity." "I know." She covered his hand with hers. "Continue the council. Push for a vote on the accords. Don't let this diversion succeed. And if the vote fails, then we implement the changes in Red Peak regardless, and let our example speak for itself." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his, an intimate gesture among wolfmen, more meaningful than a kiss in some ways. "This is bigger than us now, Draken. The future of both our kinds depends on breaking the cycle of fear and dominance." A horn sounded, signaling the force's imminent departure. Reluctantly, they separated. Draken helped Arya mount her horse, then stepped back as she assumed her position at the head of the Red Peak contingent. "Warriors of the 7 packs," she called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Today we ride not just to protect innocent lives, but to demonstrate the unity and justice that will define our future. Those who commit atrocities in Red Peak's name insult the honor of every wolfman who stands for peace and justice. We will find them, stop them, and bring them to account for their crimes." A roar of approval rose from the assembled warriors, even those from traditionally conservative packs responding to the clarity and conviction in her words. Arya noted with satisfaction that only the Shadowwood contingent seemed subdued in their response. With a final nod to Draken, she signaled the advance, leading the combined force through the mansion gates and down the mountain path toward the eastern settlements. The thundering of hooves echoed against the stone cliffs, punctuated by the occasional howl as some warriors partially shifted in anticipation of battle. Arya rode at the front, flanked by Magnus and Kral, with Sylvana close behind. The other alphas had distributed themselves throughout the column according to their preferred tactical positions. Lysander, she noted, had chosen to ride near the rear with his personal guard, a position that could be either cautious or calculating, depending on his intentions. "The settlements lie in a valley about 10 miles east," Magnus informed her as they rode. 3 distinct villages connected by trade roads. Our scouts report the northernmost is under heaviest attack." "And the attackers wear Red Peak colors?" Arya confirmed, her voice tight with controlled anger. "According to reports," Magnus affirmed. "Though any fool can don black and silver, the deception is transparent to those who understand pack politics." "Not to terrified villagers," Arya pointed out grimly. "To them, wolfmen in Red Peak colors means Draken has betrayed their trust, exactly as someone intended." Kral grunted in agreement, his massive form dwarfing his sturdy mount. "Clever strategy. Brutal, dishonorable, but clever. Discredit Draken, sabotage the Accords, and reignite human fear of our kind, all in one stroke." "The question remains, who benefits most from returning to the old ways?" Arya mused aloud. "Shadowwood has always been most aligned with tradition," Sylvana offered, guiding her horse alongside Arya's. Under Fenris's influence, they flourished through aggressive expansion and human subjugation. "Yet Lysander was quick to join our response," Arya noted, keeping her voice low. "If guilty, wouldn't he avoid direct involvement?" "Not necessarily." Sylvana's expression was grim. What better way to control the narrative than to be present when evidence is discovered? Besides, Lysander was always the strategist behind Fenris's brute force. He thinks several moves ahead. Before Arya could respond, a scout returned at full gallop, his expression urgent. "My lords, my lady, the northern settlement burns. We can see the smoke from the ridge ahead." Arya made an instant decision. "We split our forces. Magnus, take half the Red Peak warriors and the Shadowwood contingent to the southernmost village. Kral, you and Elder Rowan's son lead your forces to the central settlement. Sylvana and I will take the remainder to the northern village where fighting is heaviest." Magnus frowned. "My lady, with respect, my place is at your side as second in command." "Your place is where I assign you, Commander," Arya replied firmly. "I need someone I trust to assess the southern situation." The subtle emphasis on trust was deliberate, a challenge and an opportunity for Magnus to demonstrate his loyalty. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "As you command." The force divided at the ridge, each contingent racing toward their assigned destinations. As Arya crested the hill with Sylvana and their warriors, the full devastation of the attack became apparent. The northern settlement, a cluster of perhaps 50 structures surrounding a central marketplace, was partially engulfed in flames. Even from a distance, they could hear screams and the clash of weapons. "There!" Sylvana pointed to figures moving among the buildings, wolf men in partial shift, wearing black and silver, pursuing fleeing villagers. "They make no attempt at stealth or escape. It's as if they want to be seen." "Because they do," Arya realized, sudden clarity washing over her. "This isn't just about sabotaging the summit. It's a suicide mission. Whoever those attackers are, they don't expect to survive." Without waiting for a response, she spurred her horse forward, drawing her sword as she charged down the hillside toward the burning village. Sylvana shouted orders to her warriors, and the combined force thundered after their human leader, weapons gleaming in the midday sun. Arya reached the outskirts of the village first, leaping from her horse to engage two attackers cornering a family against a burning storefront. Her silver blade flashed, catching the first assailant across the shoulder. He howled in pain as the silver burned his flesh, spinning to face this new threat. His eyes widened in shock at the sight of her. "The human queen!" he snarled, features contorted in a partial shift that exposed elongated fangs and distorted facial structure. "Perfect." The calculated satisfaction in his voice confirmed Arya's suspicions. Her presence here was anticipated, perhaps even part of the plan. She had no time to consider the implications as both attackers abandoned their civilian prey to focus on her. They circled cautiously, more disciplined than common raiders. Their coordination spoke of military training, their measured aggression of experienced fighters. These were no rogue elements or mercenaries. They moved like pack warriors. When they attacked, they did so simultaneously from opposite sides, a professional tactic designed to divide her attention. Arya dropped into the fighting stance Draken had taught her, her blade describing a defensive arc that forced both attackers to adjust their approach. The first lunged with clawed hands extended for her throat. Arya pivoted, allowing his momentum to carry him past, while she delivered a precise slash to his hamstring. He crashed to the ground with a howl of pain, the silver weapon leaving a wound that would heal slowly, even for a wolfman. The second attacker proved more cautious, testing her defenses with feints and controlled strikes. His technique seemed familiar somehow, the specific pattern of attacks reminiscent of Red Peak training methods, but with subtle variations. Shadowwood, Arya realized aloud as she parried a particularly distinctive combination. "Your Shadowwood warriors." A flash of surprise crossed the attacker's features, quickly masked by renewed aggression. He pressed harder, forcing Arya back toward the burning building. Heat scorched her back as she ran out of room to maneuver. A blur of motion from her left was her only warning as Sylvana entered the fight, her partially shifted form moving with liquid grace. The Silver Lake Alpha caught the attacker's arm mid-strike, twisting with supernatural strength until bones cracked audibly. "Behind you!" Arya shouted as the first attacker regained his feet, limping but dangerous. Sylvana spun, facing the new threat while maintaining her hold on the first. "Take him alive," she called to Arya. "We need prisoners for questioning." Arya nodded, advancing on the injured attacker with her sword held ready. "Surrender," she commanded. "You're outnumbered and exposed. Your mission has failed." Instead of fear or resignation, a smile spread across the wolf-man's distorted features. "Has it?" He glanced skyward meaningfully. Instinct made Arya dive sideways, just as an arrow whistled through the space where she had stood. She rolled to her feet, scanning the rooftops for the hidden archer. 2 more arrows followed in quick succession, one grazing her arm through the leather armor. "Sniper on the bell tower!" Sylvana shouted, dragging her captive into the shelter of a nearby alley. "They've been waiting for us!" Arya ducked behind a water trough, mind racing. The coordinated attack, the recognition of her arrival, the positioned archer. This was indeed a carefully orchestrated trap. But to what end? If assassination was the goal, why such an elaborate setup? Unless... "Sylvana!" she called urgently. "This is a diversion. The real target must be elsewhere, the Council or Draken himself." The Silver Lake. Alpha's eyes widened in understanding. "But all 7 Alphas can't be the target. Some are here with us." "Not all 7, Arya corrected, the pieces falling into place. "Just one, the most dangerous to whoever wants to preserve the old ways." Before Sylvana could respond, a massive explosion rocked the village center, sending debris and smoke billowing into the air. The force of the blast knocked Arya against the stone wall behind her, momentarily stunning her. When her vision cleared, she saw chaos. Injured warriors, fleeing villagers, buildings collapsed from the explosion. Through the smoke, shadowy figures were retreating with disciplined coordination, covering each other as they withdrew. "They're falling back," Sylvana observed, appearing at Arya's side with blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "But why now?" "Because they've accomplished their objective," Arya realized, cold dread settling in her stomach. "This was never about destroying the village. It was about keeping us occupied while something worse unfolds elsewhere." She grabbed the arm of a passing Red Peak warrior. "Find a messenger. Fastest rider we have. Send them back to the mansion immediately. Warn Draken that this is a diversion. The real attack may be aimed at him or the Council." The warrior saluted and sprinted away. Arya turned back to Sylvana. "We need to secure these settlements and get back as quickly as possible." "My thoughts exactly," the Silver Lake Alpha agreed grimly. "Though I fear we may already be too late." They worked efficiently to organize the response, extinguishing fires, treating wounded, securing the perimeter against further attacks. Most of the raiders had escaped in the confusion following the explosion, but 3 had been captured alive, though none were in condition to be interrogated immediately. As they prepared to return to the mansion, a lone rider appeared on the ridge, a messenger from the central settlement where Kral had led his forces. "Report," Arya commanded as the rider dismounted before her. "Similar situation at the central village, my lady," the messenger replied, breathless from his hard ride. "Coordinated attack, raiders in Red Peak colors. Lord Kral's forces arrived in time to prevent major casualties, but most attackers escaped after setting off explosive devices." "And the southern settlement?" Arya asked. The messenger's expression darkened. "No word yet. We sent a scout, but they haven't returned." Sylvana and Arya exchanged concerned glances. "Magnus," Arya murmured. "Something's wrong." She made a swift decision. "Sylvana, can you handle things here? I need to get to the southern village immediately." The Silver Lake Alpha nodded. "Go. Take 20 warriors. I'll manage with the rest." Arya gathered her chosen force and rode hard for the southern settlement, anxiety building with each mile. The absence of communication from Magnus could have innocent explanations, but her instincts screamed warning. As they approached, an eerie silence greeted them. No smoke rose from the village. No sounds of conflict echoed across the valley. The settlement appeared untouched, peaceful even, which only heightened Arya's suspicion. "Approach with caution," she ordered her warriors. "Something isn't right." They entered the village slowly, weapons ready. The streets were empty, doors closed, windows shuttered. No villagers, no raiders, no sign of Magnus or his forces. "Search every building," Arya commanded. "Find our people." The warriors spread out, methodically checking structures. Arya dismounted, following her instincts toward the village square. The stillness felt unnatural, pregnant with threat. A wolfman's keen hearing saved her life. One of her guards called out sharply, "My lady, down!" just as a crossbow bolt whispered through the air where her head had been a moment before. Arya dropped to a crouch, scanning for the shooter. Movement on a rooftop caught her eye, a figure ducking behind a chimney. Not the disciplined raiders they had faced earlier, but someone local. "Hold your position," she called to her warriors, who had started toward the building. "No pursuit. This isn't what we're here for." With heightened caution, they continued toward the village square. As they rounded the final corner, Arya stopped abruptly, the blood draining from her face at the sight before them. In the center of the square, a large wooden platform had been erected. Upon it, displayed like grotesque trophies, were the bodies of Magnus and 5 Red Peak warriors. They had been killed execution-style, throats slashed, and arranged in a deliberate pattern that formed the ancient wolfmen symbol for traitor. Most disturbing was the state of the bodies. They had been dead for hours, not minutes. This attack had happened long before the raids on the other settlements, perhaps even before the council had convened. "By the moon," whispered one of her warriors. "Commander Magnus, how is this possible? We only received reports of attacks this morning." Arya approached the platform slowly, rage and grief battling within her. Magnus may have been a suspect in her mind, but he was still Pack, still one of Draken's trusted commanders. His death like this, calculated, ritualistic, message-sending, spoke of something far darker than simple opposition to the Accords. "Where are the Shadowwood warriors?" she asked, scanning the square. "They were supposed to be with Magnus." "My lady," called one of her scouts, emerging from a side street. "We found them, or what's left of them, in the meeting hall, all dead, similarly executed." Arya's mind raced, reassessing everything in light of this discovery. The timing, the deliberate staging, the murdered Shadowwood contingent. This wasn't just about disrupting the summit or discrediting Draken. This was eliminationism, a purge. "We've been played," she realized aloud. "All of us, even Lysander. This isn't Pack against Pack, it's something else entirely." She turned to her captain. "Leave 10 warriors to secure the village and prepare the bodies for transport. The rest come with me. We ride for the mansion immediately." As they galloped back toward Red Peak, Arya's thoughts churned with dark possibilities. The mysterious third shift Elder Rowan had mentioned, the oblique references to the Sundering in the archives, the organization called Lunar Guardians, all pieces of a puzzle she hadn't fully assembled. But one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. The threat facing them wasn't just to the Accords or to Draken's vision of the future. It was an existential challenge to both species, orchestrated by someone willing to sacrifice wolfmen and humans alike to maintain a system built on fear and subjugation. And if her growing suspicions were correct, the final act of this bloody drama was unfolding at Red Peak Mansion even as they raced to prevent it. "Faster!" she urged her mount, the wind whipping tears from her eyes as they thundered up the mountain path. "We must not be too late." The Red Peak Mansion came into view as Arya and her warriors crested the final ridge. Sunset painted the stone walls crimson, an ominous backdrop to the scene that greeted them. No guards patrolled the outer walls. No sentries called challenges from the watchtowers. An unnatural silence hung over the fortress that should have been bustling with activity. "Something's very wrong," Arya murmured, signaling her warriors to halt. "Captain, send scouts to circle the perimeter. Find me an entry point that isn't the main gate." "You suspect a trap, my lady?" the captain asked, already signaling 2 of his swiftest warriors forward. "I suspect everything," Arya replied grimly. "Magnus and his forces were dead for hours before we received word of attacks. Someone planned this meticulously, manipulating all sides. The Shadowwood contingent wasn't spared either. This isn't about pack rivalries, it's something else entirely. While the scouts moved silently toward the mansion, Arya studied the fortress through narrowed eyes. No smoke rose from the chimneys despite the evening chill. No lights flickered in the windows. The massive iron gate stood partially open, not forced, but deliberately left ajar. "An invitation," she observed. "They want us to enter." One of the scouts returned, moving with the preternatural speed of a partially shifted wolfman. "My lady," he reported, kneeling before her. "We found an unguarded entry through the servants' quarters on the eastern side. But there's more. The scent of blood is strong throughout the fortress, and we detected movement in the council hall." "The summit continues?" Arya frowned in confusion. "Not as it began," the scout replied darkly. "There are fewer heartbeats than there should be for a full council." Arya made her decision quickly. "We divide our forces. Captain, take half the warriors and create a diversion at the main gate. Draw attention, make noise, but do not engage unnecessarily. The rest come with me through the eastern entrance. Our priority is reaching the council hall and assessing the situation." The captain saluted, clearly understanding the unspoken element of her orders. They were likely riding into an ambush, and someone needed to survive to carry word to the other alphas if the worst happened. As dusk deepened into true night, Arya led her small force through the shadowed gardens toward the eastern wall. The familiar grounds felt alien now, every rustling leaf and shifting shadow potentially concealing enemies. They reached the servants' entrance without incident. Another worrying sign. Any competent strategist would have secured all entry points. "Too easy," Arya whispered, as they slipped through the unlocked door into the darkened kitchens. "Stay alert." The interior of the mansion was eerily silent. No servants bustled through the corridors. No guards stood at their posts. The great hearths that usually kept the stone halls warm had gone cold, leaving a damp chill in the air. They encountered the first bodies in the main corridor leading to the residential wing. 3 Red Peak guards slumped against the wall, throats cut with surgical precision. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. They had been killed by someone they trusted enough to let approach closely. "An inside job," Arya breathed, examining the wounds. "Someone with access and authority." Further along, they found more victims, servants, counselors, visiting dignitaries, all killed swiftly, efficiently, without opportunity to raise alarm. The methodical execution spoke of multiple assailants working in perfect coordination. As they neared the council hall, sounds finally broke the silence. Voices raised in argument, though too muffled by the thick oak doors to distinguish words. Arya signaled her warriors to take up positions along the corridor while she moved silently to a small antechamber beside the hall, where a concealed observation port allowed the Alpha's security to monitor council proceedings discreetly. What she saw through the narrow opening froze her blood. The council hall had been transformed into a macabre tableau. The great circular table had been pushed to one side, creating an open space in the center where Draken knelt, bound with silver chains that burned his flesh. Blood streaked his face and soaked his formal attire, though his expression remained defiant despite obvious pain. Around him stood a ring of figures in unfamiliar uniforms, neither pack colors nor human military dress, but something that combined elements of both. Black tactical gear with silver insignia depicting a stylized wolf's head impaled by a crescent moon blade. Pacing before the captive Alpha was a figure Arya recognized with shock. Aspen, son of Elder Rowan, his usual courteous demeanor replaced by cold authority as he addressed the prisoners. Behind him, seated in his father's ceremonial chair, the ancient Alpha himself watched with grim satisfaction. "The Lunar Guardians have waited 60 years for this moment," Aspen was saying, his voice carrying clearly now. "The day when the 7 packs would gather, distracted by petty politics while we positioned our forces. Your precious summit provided the perfect opportunity." "You're insane," Draken growled, struggling against his bonds. "The Lunar Guardians were disbanded after the Sundering. My father saw to that personally." "Disbanded?" Elder Rowan's laugh was a dry rattle. "No, Draken. We merely went underground, recruiting from both species, building our strength. The Silverclaw line believed they had destroyed us, but they merely scattered seeds that have grown into a mighty forest. Arya's mind raced to connect these revelations with the fragments she had uncovered in the archives. The sundering, not a natural shift in relations between species, but a violent purge. The lunar guardians, not protectors, but extremists, dedicated to maintaining separation between humans and wolfmen. "Where is Arya?" Draken demanded, his voice hoarse with pain but unwavering. "What have you done with her?" "Your human pet?" Aspen smiled coldly. "Precisely where we need her to be, chasing shadows in the eastern settlements while we complete our work here. By the time she returns, if she survives at all, the cleansing will be complete." "The cleansing?" Kral's voice came from beyond Arya's limited view. "You speak in riddles, traitor." "Not riddles, Blood Mountain," Elder Rowan responded. "Simple truth. Wolves and sheep cannot coexist as equals. The natural order demands predator and prey. Draken's vision of harmony is a perversion of that order, threatening both species with degradation." "So you orchestrated all this, the attacks, the diversions, to what end?" Sylvana's voice now tight with controlled fury. "To preserve an antiquated system that serves neither human nor wolfman?" "To preserve purity," Aspen corrected sharply. "The companion system maintained necessary distance while allowing controlled breeding. Draken would throw open the gates, encourage mingling, dilute bloodlines until the true wolf spirit is extinguished." His hand dropped to a silver dagger at his belt, not the ceremonial lunar blade, but a similar weapon. "The sundering taught us that half measures are insufficient. This time, we eliminate the problem at its root." Arya had heard enough. Slipping back from the observation port, she rejoined her waiting warriors. "Draken lives," she whispered, along with some of the other alphas. "They're being held by a group calling themselves the Lunar Guardians, led by Aspen and Elder Rowan. They plan executions. The cleansing, they called it." The captain's eyes widened. "Elder Rowan? But he's the most respected alpha in the territories, and has apparently harbored this extremist agenda for decades," Arya replied grimly. "We're outnumbered inside, but we have surprise. Our diversion at the main gate should begin any moment. When it does, we strike." She outlined her plan quickly. Half their remaining force would enter through the council hall's rear ceremonial doors, creating chaos and drawing attention. Arya and 3 warriors would use that distraction to target Aspen and free Draken, whose strength even wounded would turn the tide. As if on cue, a tremendous crash echoed from the direction of the main gates, followed by shouts and howls as the diversionary force engaged. Arya nodded to her warriors. "Now!" The assault unfolded with brutal efficiency. The rear doors burst inward as wolfmen warriors charged into the council hall, partially shifted and battle-ready. Arya followed in their wake, sword drawn, targeting Aspen, who stood nearest to Draken. The Lunar Guardians reacted with military precision, forming defensive positions around Elder Rowan, while others moved to engage the attackers. They fought with unusual discipline for wolfmen, restraining the berserker instincts that typically dominated in battle. Arya ducked beneath a guard's swinging blade, her smaller stature an advantage in the chaotic melee. She caught glimpses of the other alphas, Kral and Sylvana bound like Draken, Lysander's body sprawled lifelessly near the far wall. No sign of the Frost River Alpha or the verdant Vale heir who should have been attending his father. Aspen saw her coming, his face registering momentary surprise before twisting into a sneer. "The human queen returns," he called mockingly, drawing his silver dagger. "How convenient. Now we can complete the set." He lunged with unexpected speed, the blade whistling past Arya's cheek as she twisted aside. Unlike the disciplined but ultimately predictable raiders in the settlement, Aspen moved with lethal grace, each attack flowing seamlessly into the next. "You fight well for a human," he observed as they circled each other. "But you cannot overcome biology. Wolves will always hunt sheep." "I'm not a sheep," Arya replied, feinting left before striking right, her blade scoring a shallow cut across his arm. "And you're not a true wolf, just a rabid dog who needs putting down." Fury flashed in his eyes at the insult. His next attack came with increased aggression, sacrificing technique for power. Arya recognized the tactical opportunity and pivoted away, using his momentum against him as she had learned from Draken. As Aspen stumbled past, she delivered a precise kick to the back of his knee, dropping him momentarily to the ground. It gave her the opening she needed to dash toward Draken, whose eyes had never left her since her entrance. "The key!" he gasped as she reached him, nodding toward a small silver object hanging from Aspen's belt. "Silver alloy. Burns too much for me to touch." Arya spun back toward Aspen, who was regaining his feet with a snarl of rage. Around them, the battle raged, Red Peak warriors holding their own against the Lunar Guardians, despite being outnumbered. Elder Rowan had been moved to a protected alcove, shouting orders to his followers with surprising vigor for his apparent frailty. "You cannot win this," Aspen growled, advancing on Arya again. "The Lunar Guardians have cells in every territory, loyal to our cause. Even if you survive today, our movement continues." "A movement based on lies," Arya retorted, matching his movements as they circled. "You don't want to preserve either species. You want power, control, dominance." "What I want," Aspen snarled, "is the natural order restored." He attacked with renewed ferocity, forcing Arya to give ground. Her back hit a pillar, momentarily trapping her as his blade descended in a killing arc. She dropped to one knee, thrusting upward with her sword, aiming for his heart. Aspen twisted aside, avoiding a fatal blow, but Arya's blade penetrated his shoulder deeply. He howled in pain as the silver alloy weapon burned through muscle and sinew. His dagger clattered to the floor as his arm went momentarily limp. Arya seized the opportunity, driving her shoulder into his wounded side while grabbing for the key at his belt. Her fingers closed around it as they both tumbled to the ground. Aspen's good hand locked around her throat, claws extending to puncture skin. "I'll tear your throat out, human," he rasped, face contorting as he began to shift further. Blood trickled down Arya's neck as his claws dug deeper. With desperate strength, she brought her knee up sharply between them, creating enough space to slash her sword across his forearm. The silver blade severed tendons, forcing his grip to release as he howled in agony. Scrambling away, Arya clutched the precious key and raced back to Draken. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the silver chains, the metal still hot enough to sear her human skin, though not with the intensity wolfmen experienced. As the restraints fell away, Draken surged to his feet despite his injuries, the alpha power emanating from him in palpable waves. His eyes flashed with dangerous intensity as they fixed on Aspen, who had regained his feet and was backing toward where Elder Rowan stood protected by his guards. "Free the others," Draken commanded Arya, his voice rough with controlled fury. "This ends now." He launched himself across the chamber with supernatural speed, crashing into the protective line of Lunar Guardians like a battering ram. Warriors went flying as the enraged Alpha tore through their ranks, his partially shifted form combining human intellect with bestial strength. Arya raced to where Kral and Sylvana remained bound, unlocking their restraints with shaking hands. The moment they were free, both Alphas joined the fray. Kral with a roaring battle cry that shook the very stones. Sylvana with silent, deadly efficiency. The tide turned swiftly. Without their leaders' coordination, the Lunar Guardians' discipline fractured. Some fought to the death, while others attempted retreat, only to encounter the reinforcements now pouring in through the main doors, the diversionary force having secured the outer courtyard. In the center of the chaos, Draken cornered Aspen against a pillar. The younger wolfman was bleeding from multiple wounds, his previous confidence replaced by desperate fear. "Mercy!" he gasped, raising his uninjured hand. "By pack law, I claim right of surrender." "Pack law?" Draken's laugh held no humor. "You forsook pack law when you joined this cult of extremism, when you plotted against your alpha, when you murdered innocents to preserve an obsolete order." His hand closed around Aspen's throat, claws extending. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't tear your heart out." "Because that's exactly what they want." Arya's voice cut through Draken's rage as she approached. "Violence justifying violence. Wolfmen proving their bestial nature. If you kill him like this, you validate everything the Lunar Guardians believe." Draken's eyes, glowing with primal fury, met hers. For a moment, she feared the wolf had consumed the man entirely. Then gradually, reason returned to his gaze. "What would you have me do?" he asked, his grip on Aspen not loosening. Let him live to plot again? To rebuild his cult from the shadows as they did before? "No," Arya replied firmly. "I would have you show true leadership. Justice, not vengeance. A public trial where all packs and human settlements can witness his crimes and the evidence against him. Let his punishment be decided by the laws you wish to establish, laws that respect both human and wolfman traditions." "Listen to her, Draken," Sylvana urged, approaching with Crawl beside her. Both were bloodied but triumphant. "The human speaks wisdom. Death would be too quick, too easy. Let him live with his failure, imprisoned as he would have imprisoned our futures." Draken's struggle was visible, the Alpha's instinct for dominance warring with the visionary leader's understanding of symbolic power. After what seemed an eternity, he released his grip, allowing Aspen to collapse gasping to the floor. "Bind him," he ordered the nearby warriors. "Silver restraints, and find Elder Rowan. He does not escape judgment for his role in this treachery." But when they reached the alcove where the ancient Alpha had been protected, they found only an empty chair and a pool of blood. In the chaos of battle, someone had spirited the Elder away, or he had sacrificed himself to ensure his son's capture would not end their cause. "He can't have gone far," Crawl growled. "I'll organize search parties." "Do so," Draken agreed. "But first, secure the mansion. Check for survivors. Treat the wounded. Account for all Alphas and counselors." As the others dispersed to their tasks, Draken turned to Arya, his expression softening as he truly saw her for the first time since her arrival. Bloody, bruised, but undefeated. "You came back," he said simply, reaching to touch the wounds on her neck where Aspen's claws had pierced skin. "Did you doubt I would?" she asked, leaning into his touch despite the sting. "Never," he replied. "But I feared what you might return to find. When the Lunar Guardians struck during the council session, when we realized the attacks on the settlements were diversions," his voice caught. "They boasted of traps set for you, ambushes planned for your return." "They underestimated me," Arya said with grim satisfaction. "As everyone always does. It's becoming quite the advantage." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before fading as he surveyed the devastation around them. So much death. And for what? To preserve a system that diminishes both our kinds? "Fear," Arya replied softly. "Fear of change, fear of the unknown. The Lunar Guardians believed separation was the only way to preserve both species. Wolfmen as predators, humans as prey, each in their natural place." Draken's expression darkened. There was nothing natural about what they planned. According to Lysander, before they executed him for refusing to join their cause, the cleansing would have eliminated all progressive elements from both species, starting with the Alphas who supported reform, continuing to human settlements open to alliance. "A purge to ensure division," Arya concluded. Elder Rowan spoke of the sundering as if it were a previous attempt at the same goal. "It was," Draken confirmed grimly. 60 years ago, a similar conspiracy nearly succeeded, eliminating an entire generation of reform-minded Alphas. My father survived only because he was away from the territories at the time. We believed the threat ended when the ringleaders were executed, but clearly, they simply went underground. He turned as Sylvana approached, her expression grave. "The count is complete," she reported. 23 dead among our combined forces, including Lysander of Shadow Wood and the Frost River Alpha. Elder Rowan remains missing, and 17 Lunar Guardians captured alive. "And the human settlements?" Arya asked urgently. "Are there other attacks planned?" According to documents we found on one of the commanders, simultaneous strikes were planned against 6 major settlements and 4 pack strongholds, Sylvana replied. "I've dispatched messengers to warn them, but we cannot be certain we've uncovered all their plans." Draken's jaw tightened. "This conspiracy runs deeper than we imagined. If Elder Rowan has escaped, he'll attempt to rally whatever cells remain active." Then we must be equally decisive, Arya stated firmly. The summit may have been disrupted, but its purpose remains vital. The accords must be ratified, not despite this attack, but because of it. Draken looked at her with surprise. You would continue with reform after all this bloodshed? The bloodshed makes it more necessary, not less, Arya insisted. The Lunar Guardians sought to preserve division because they feared unity would end their power. They were right, and that's precisely why we must proceed. Sylvana nodded slowly. I agree. Silver Lake stands with Red Peak. The accords must be finalized. Blood Mountain as well, Kral's voice boomed as he rejoined them. My warriors have secured the perimeter. No sign of Elder Rowan, but we captured 3 more Guardians attempting to flee through the underground passages. Draken looked between his fellow Alphas, then to Arya, his expression resolute. Very well. Tomorrow, we reconvene what remains of the Council. The 3 of us represent packs with enough combined territory to implement the accords, even without unanimous approval. And Verdant Vale? Sylvana asked. With Elder Rowan revealed as a traitor, leadership falls to his nephew, not Aspen. The young wolf is untested, but by all accounts moderate in his views. We offer him a choice, Draken decided. Join our alliance or maintain neutrality, but the old order is ending regardless. As the conversation continued, Arya felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. The events of the past day, the battles, revelations, near-death experiences, suddenly caught up with her in a rush. She swayed slightly, prompting Draken to steady her with concern. You need rest, he murmured. And treatment for these wounds. She wanted to protest, to insist on continuing the strategic discussions, but found herself nodding instead. A brief respite, she conceded. There's much still to be done. Draken led her from the council hall, through corridors now filled with warriors establishing order where chaos had reigned hours before. Bodies had been removed, blood cleaned from stone floors, evidence of the Lunar Guardians' attack methodically documented for the trials to come. Their chambers had been untouched by the violence, a small mercy in a day of horrors. As Draken gently cleaned and dressed her wounds, Arya found her mind racing despite her physical exhaustion. What troubles you? He asked, sensing her disquiet. Beyond the obvious, I mean. Elder Rowan, she admitted. His escape feels orchestrated, as if capturing Aspen was an acceptable sacrifice to preserve something greater. Draken's hands paused in their ministrations. You believe he had further plans beyond today's attack? The Lunar Guardians survived underground for 60 years, planning this moment, Arya reasoned. They wouldn't risk everything without contingencies. Elder Rowan is too calculating to be caught unless he chose to be. A diversion within a diversion, Draken murmured, understanding dawning in his eyes. While we focus on Aspen and the immediate threat, Elder Rowan escapes to implement some final phase of their plan. Exactly, Arya nodded, wincing as the movement pulled at her neck wounds. But what? What could be more devastating than the assassination of multiple alphas? Draken resumed cleaning her injuries, his expression thoughtful. In the ancient texts, there are legends of a ritual called the Moonblood Severance, a ceremony said to permanently sever the mystical connection between humans and wolfmen that allows transformation and bonding. Arya's eyes widened. Such a thing is possible? Supposedly, it requires 3 elements: the blood of an alpha from each of the 7 major bloodlines, a true blood-bonded human, and the convergence of specific astronomical conditions. His gaze met hers, troubled. The ritual must be performed during a lunar eclipse. When is the next eclipse? Arya asked, a chill running down her spine despite the warm room. 3 days from now, Draken replied grimly. The timing cannot be coincidence. Arya pieced it together swiftly. The summit gathered alphas from all 7 bloodlines in one place. The attacks were meant to capture, not necessarily kill you all. Aspen spoke of completing the set when he saw me. And you, Draken continued, the only confirmed blood-bonded in generations, were meant to be captured in the eastern settlements. But I survived, and now Aspen is our prisoner, Arya countered. Elder Rowan can't complete the ritual without all the elements. Unless, Draken said slowly, he has alternatives. Lysander is dead, but his blood could have been collected, the Frost River Alpha as well, and while you are the most powerful blood-bonded known, there may be others with weaker connections he could substitute. The implications settled heavily between them. Even now, with their apparent victory, Elder Rowan might be preparing a ritual that would forever separate their kinds, ensuring the division the Lunar Guardians had fought to preserve would become permanent biological reality. "We need to find him," Arya declared, attempting to rise despite her exhaustion. "If there's even a chance this ritual could succeed." Draken gently but firmly pressed her back to the bed. "And we will. Tomorrow, after you've rested. You cannot fight this battle in your current state." She wanted to argue, but knew he was right. Her human body, however extraordinary, had limits that wolfmen did not share. "Promise me we'll begin at first light," she insisted. 3 days isn't much time to locate a missing alpha and uncover a ritual site. "I promise," he agreed, completing the bandaging of her wounds. "But for now, sleep. Tomorrow we hunt Elder Rowan, and the day after we finalize the accords. The future will not be stolen from us. Not again." As Arya finally surrendered to exhaustion, drifting toward sleep in the safety of Draken's arms, her last conscious thought was of her grandmother's pendant, the silver crescent that had accompanied her through auction block, battle, and transformation from captive to queen. "When all seems dark," the old woman had said, "remember that even the thinnest crescent still reflects light." In the darkness that now threatened both their kinds, Arya would need to be that light, a beacon guiding them toward the unity that their enemies so desperately feared. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, but for tonight, she gathered strength for the final confrontation that would determine the fate of humans and wolfmen alike. The light of a new dawn would come, and with it, the hunt for Elder Rowan and the final chance to secure the future they had fought so hard to create.